On September 21st, 2023, a Twitter page by the name of Arcasuchus uploaded this rather unsettling image of a raptor dinosaur looking through a glass door with the caption, "Our dog has been barking and scratching up the back door every night. He has been doing this for days, so I sat with him last night to find the issue. I snapped a flash pic of the back door when he barked and captured this. Be very careful outside because this does not look normal." This single post would go viral and end up launching a new trend of dinosaur horror, where people would share images of fictional dinosaur sightings out in the wild that were made to look natural and realistic, yet disturbing. This would become known as the Weird Birds trend. On August 29th, 2022, a small YouTube channel by the name of Rostico would upload a video titled InGen's Hostile Dinosaur Safety Video VHS. The video is in the style of the very popular horror trend known as analog horror, but in a rather unusual twist, it's centered around the 1993 film Jurassic Park. The video starts off as an innocent orientation video meant to be viewed by InGen employees that's about dinosaur safety, before abruptly transitioning into a mash of disturbing imagery and cryptic messages, indicating a sinister story at play here. This would be one of the earliest videos to kickstart a subgenre of analog horror simply known as Jurassic Park analog horror. From around 2018 on, there has been a massive influx of new dinosaur horror games, ranging from Jurassic Park fan games, to survival horror, to action shooters, and so on and so forth. The earliest examples in more recent times that I could find are games like Raptor, T-Rex Breakout, Oakwood, and so on. But between then and now, the sheer amount of indie dinosaur horror games has increased by a wide margin. One of the things all three of these topics have in common, aside from the fact that they're all horror-oriented, is that they're all prime examples of what the current state of visual dinosaur horror media looks like. Small-scale productions made through independent means that have become popular enough to inspire new trends and stories on a seemingly regular basis. In fact, this seems to be the most popular dinosaur horror has ever gotten, because it wasn't always like this. Dinosaurs have had a rocky history when it comes to horror. Over the last century and a half, this subgenre of media has come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. From gothic body horror stories, to symbolism of real-world tragedies, to 8-bit puzzle video games, to cheesy low-budget horror flicks. But for various reasons, they didn't really stick. There's definitely a lot to talk about when it comes to the world of dinosaurs and horror, but these older examples are a topic for another day. What I am interested in talking about today are the more contemporary examples of dinosaur horror, more specifically, examples within the last decade, because despite the lack of mainstream success this subgenre has received, at least in terms of exposure, the demand for it nowadays is at an all-time high. And that's evident by the seemingly endless stream of small-scale projects released by individuals and independent creators who've taken this interest and have done things with it that larger media companies seem too scared in doing. Indie dinosaur horror games, analog horror, and ARGs are just some of the few contributors of this current trend of dinosaur horror content that's shown no signs of slowing down. In fact, many people have asked me to cover several of these projects, but I've hesitated to do so because admittedly, I wasn't all that interested in it. But I recently looked into a few of these projects and I realized that not only are the projects themselves very interesting, at least most of them, but so is their background and history. The first question that came to mind when I first started looking into this trend was, why? Why has there been this sudden influx of these kinds of dinosaur projects? Why now of all times? Where did this interest come from? Questions like these don't have one answer. There's multiple factors at play here that explains why this trend exists. And the first answer is that the interest in dinosaur horror never really left the public sphere within this community. Sure, there was a point in time where it just wasn't as popular, but people still clearly wanted it, and that's evident by the different inspirations behind the creations of many of these modern projects. While dinosaur horror has been around to some extent or another within the last 120-something years, I'd argue the real point in time that planted the seed for what would later cause it to be a much bigger trend was the 90s. The 90s was the decade of the dinosaurs. It's one of, if not the biggest example of dinomania, with movies, books, video games, TV shows, and specials branching out to all kinds of genres. family adventures, attempted comedies, educational documentaries, and even horror. Hell, Jurassic Park itself, the movie that spearheaded this rise of 90s dinomania, also included elements of horror. While not a straight-up horror movie, Jurassic Park can definitely be seen as adjacent to the genre, at the very least being considered a science fiction thriller. A group of scientists are invited to an early showing of a theme park attraction that also includes genetically engineered dinosaurs that eventually break out of their enclosures and endangers our characters. Despite its primarily family-friendly adventure story, there are still scenes that are more dark-toned and offer intense build-up, enough to instill a sense of fear and worry to the audience. Like the kitchen scene where Tim and Lex are crawling around the floor trying to avoid the raptors as they wander around and explore the kitchen just mere feet away from them. You also have other scenes that exhibit the same sense of intense fear, like when the T-Rex breaks out of its enclosure and when Nedry is stalked by the Dilophosaurus. It makes sense that Jurassic Park has these kinds of scenes within the movie, as you could consider it to be leftover elements from the much more intense and horrific scenes depicted in its source material, a book made in 1990 by Michael Crichton. The Jurassic Park book, often described as a techno-thriller, is much more gruesome than its movie counterpart, featuring babies getting eaten alive by Compsognathuses, Nedry getting his guts ripped out by a much larger Dilophosaurus, Dr. Henry Wu getting mauled to death by raptors, and so on. Of course, this violence would be toned down to make the movie more marketable to a wider range of people, offering more of a family-friendly adventure than a gory horror flick. But dinosaur lovers would still get their fix of an actual dinosaur horror film in the form of Carnosaur, a Roger Corman-produced creature feature that was intended to capitalize off of the Jurassic Park hype. But unlike the Jurassic Park film, this movie didn't have as much restrictions given its B-movie status, and got away with a lot more gore-filled scenes. The movie is based in a small Nevada town that faces a series of murders that's done by a genetically engineered dinosaur made by a mad scientist who wants to see the human race burn. There's scenes of people getting torn apart by the dinosaurs. One guy gets his head bitten off by a Deinonychus. The main antagonist gives birth to a baby dinosaur that rips through her stomach alien style. A T-Rex gets disemboweled by a skid steer loader, and so on. Believe it or not, the violence in the Carnosaur movie was also toned down in comparison to its source material, a sci-fi horror book with the same name, written by John Brosnan under his pseudonym Harry Adam Knight in 1984. However, that was more for budgetary reasons than restrictions getting in the way of more violence. That, and Corman wasn't actually interested in following the contents from the novel because he just wanted the name to use for his own movie. Despite being a B-movie, Carnosaur would actually become pretty successful, garnering $1.8 million in the box office with its limited theater run against its apparent $500,000 budget. And it made even more in video rental sales, making another $5.5 million. Due to its success, Brosnan's book would get republished in the 90s during this spike of dinomania, and it would give it the mild popularity it didn't get back when it was first released almost 10 years earlier. It's revolved around a local journalist who investigates a series of murders in a small England town that seems to be caused by one of the exotic animals owned by a rich lord named Sir Penward. These exotic animals are revealed to be dinosaurs that he created for the sake of allowing them a second chance at life. The book was really gory, even more than what was featured in Crichton's Jurassic Park book. You had people getting eviscerated, eaten alive, and limbs getting torn off by the dinosaurs. There's even a scene where a Deinonychus kills a little girl before going after her mother and brother. The mother gets her throat slashed right in front of her child, leaving him completely catatonic, before the raptor is tranquilized and subdued. The book even starts out with a farmer getting his entire body slashed open after encountering the raptor in his chicken warehouse. Bottom line, it was an intense book. But there were other examples of dinosaur horror that showed up in other mediums during this point in time, like video games for example. In 1999, the Japanese video game developer Capcom would release Dino Crisis for PlayStation, Dreamcast, and Microsoft Windows. Dino Crisis is about a team of special ops agents that are sent to the tropical Ibis Island to investigate a science facility, but they soon discover the facility is overrun by bloodthirsty dinosaurs. The game utilized a lot of the survival horror elements that its predecessor, the Resident Evil franchise, used for their early games. Hell, in some cases, people apparently describe described the game as Resident Evil but with dinosaurs. Regardless of how people perceived the game, one thing's certain: it was a huge success, selling 2.4 million copies. But the success for all of the examples I've listed doesn't just stop there. The horror would continue, as all of them would end up spawning sequels due to their popularity. The Jurassic Park movie did so well, its director, Steven Spielberg, convinced Crichton to write another book, which he would in 1995, titled The Lost World. This, in turn, would launch another movie sequel titled The Lost World Jurassic Park in 1997, and then eventually Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, which exhibited their own horror-related elements. But to really take it a step into actual horror, there was also 2002's Project Evolution, the Jurassic Park themed attraction that featured in Universal Studios' Halloween Horror Nights Island of Fear, which really took advantage of the thriller side of Jurassic Park because they would take it and amp it up by 1,000%, because this attraction included loose velociraptors, creepy dinosaur-human hybrids that were the product of a mad scientist named Dr. Burton, who also created some crazy hybrid concoction called the Grebnadu, which was designed, but from my understanding, no recordings of it during the actual Halloween Horror Nights event seems to exist. In any case, it's just an example of how Jurassic Park is able to dip its toe into horror. Corman ended up predicting Carnosaur's popularity because before the first one was even finished with production, he was already having the script written for part 2, which would be released in 1995 along with a third movie in 1996. Dino Crisis would also be continued, having 2 more sequels and 2 spin-off games as well. The 90s and even early 2000s was one of the most popular eras dinosaur horror would ever get, at least as far as its mainstream success goes. Sure, Carnosaur is more of an exception to the whole mainstream thing given its B-movie status, but considering Corman went through great lengths to make this movie a success, promoting and marketing it more than his average films, along with getting it released a month before Jurassic Park, not to mention its overall success that resulted in this, I'd say it was mainstream enough for its time. And even if the quality of these works haven't always been the best as these franchises continued, it's clear they still left an impact on people during this point in time. However, all these 90s examples that I've listed are either non-existent or extremely minimal nowadays. And it's because of this severe lack of mainstream dinosaur content that explains why there's so many dinosaur horror indie projects right now. As time went on, it became clear that, especially in the film industry, certain formulas work for movies to make them more successful. Not necessarily in terms of quality, but more so in terms of making them less of a liability. Movies that get hit with high ratings just don't do as well as movies that get pushed out to wider demographics. And considering the general belief is that dinosaurs have proven to be more successful in more family and even kid-friendly settings, dinosaurs have become more safe in modern mainstream media. Sure, they're not the movie monsters they used to be in the earlier decades before the 90s, but Jurassic Park already proved that realistic animal behaviors can be pretty frightening without resorting to that monster movie mindset. But it seems that idea has been lost in translation to modern dinosaur movies, because even the ones that attempt to explore the more horror side to them don't always succeed in comparison to their 90s counterparts. Look no further than the Jurassic World movies. Fast forward to 2015, Jurassic World is released, the very movie that would kickstart a new trilogy of Jurassic films after 14 years of dormancy. The island has been rebranded and finally opened to the public after the events of the first trilogy went south. However, it's revealed that the people running Jurassic World have created a hybrid super predator named Indominus Rex that manages to escape and wreak havoc across the park. Sounds like a very interesting direction to take the franchise into. Surely, the horror elements present in the first trilogy will return in this one, right? Well, to an extent, yeah, kind of. Jurassic World is pretty minimal with its horror, though. The most horror you can find is with the Indominus Rex itself, since the movie showcases this new dinosaur threat as a hyper-intelligent science experiment gone wrong, that goes out of its way to kill for sport. Sounds like a terrifying concept, and while there's definitely scenes of the Indominus Rex being portrayed as such, the horror is not as present as its 90s predecessor. Or at the very least, it's just not portrayed in the same way. Jurassic Park's horror was more atmospheric, with a slower build-up to intensify the moment for the audience. Jurassic World's horror feels more fast-paced, with the majority of it coming from building up what the Indominus Rex is capable of. Camouflaging, killing for sport, communicating with other dinosaurs to its own advantage, and so on. All terrifying abilities for a hyper-intelligent super predator to have. Overall, it feels like the Indominus Rex was a step in the right direction as far as dinosaur horror went, but it wasn't quite there yet. However, that all changed with the next movie, 2018's Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. After the events of the first Jurassic World movie, our characters want to preserve the lives of the dinosaurs left behind on Isla Nublar after an active volcano threatens their lives. They're helped by a wealthy group that turns out to be a shady organization that used them to recapture the dinosaurs to sell in an auction to rich people. It's here their newest dinosaur hybrid creation is revealed, the Indoraptor. Using the DNA of the Indominus Rex, they created the Indoraptor to essentially be used as a weapon. And like the Indominus Rex, it's extremely intelligent and manages to escape. From here, the movie turns into this mash of gothic creature feature and home invasion horror, which in my opinion does work to some extent in this movie. But there's still flaws with the Indoraptor, namely with how held back it feels like in the movie. And this is evident by the reveal of cut scenes that would have given this dinosaur a proper backstory that could have, by extension, added a lot to what makes it scary. In certain cases, fear does seem to be more effective when it's explained why something does what it does to inflict harm or pain to others. In the context of dinosaurs, people were already used to the old tropes of dinosaurs being mindless, bloodthirsty monsters. In the context of Fallen Kingdom, people were already used to a hybrid dinosaur being intelligent enough to inflict harm for sport. In the case of the Indoraptor, a proper backstory that explains why it does certain things could have made it a much more disturbing threat. For example, when Wheatley sees the Indoraptor for the first time and wants one of its teeth for his collection, he shoots the dinosaur with 2 darts to knock it out, opens its cage, and attempts to collect a tooth, before suddenly the seemingly tranquilized monster springs up and kills the hunter. After Fallen Kingdom's release, it was revealed there was a scrapped scene in which the antagonist would explain why the Indoraptor's cage was dark, how the dinosaur was tranked with 2 darts to allow a technician to go in and change the bulb, only to find out 2 darts weren't enough to keep the dinosaur down. The Indoraptor would kill the technician whose body was never retrieved from the cage. The scene would have ended with the Indoraptor essentially playing with the technician's skull. Apparently this scene is written out in the film's junior novelization, but had it made it into the movie itself, it would have added so much to the Indoraptor. It would have explained how it already outsmarted humans prior to its escape in Fallen Kingdom and how it was able to withstand Wheatley's 2 trank darts. And in turn, it would have further showcased just how disturbingly smart this dinosaur was. The main issue with the Indoraptor in the only real Jurassic World movie that exemplifies modern dinosaur horror is that it feels held back by these missed opportunities. But it still does more with the medium than Jurassic World Dominion, where the horror-centric scenes with the dinosaurs are pretty much gone completely. Most of them have been replaced with more action-based sequences, and even the main dinosaur villain, quote-unquote, isn't even that much of a real threat. Not because the dinosaur itself isn't scary, but because it's not used in a way that gives off that same kind of horror you'd feel with the Indominus Rex or the Indoraptor. After the events of Fallen Kingdom, our characters now live in a world where the dinosaurs are now part of the mainland. But after they're thrown back into the mix dealing with the dinosaurs against their will, they have to go up against several other dinosaur threats, the main one being the Giganotosaurus. The Giganotosaurus isn't even really much of a threat in this movie. It feels like a threat out of obligation because the other Jurassic World movies had actual dinosaur antagonists, but out of all the theropod dinosaurs featured in this trilogy, Giganotosaurus was probably the most realistic one that acted like an actual animal, despite whatever Colin Trevorrow has said about it in the past. And that's not to say actual animals can't be scary, because they definitely can. But it's clear they weren't using the same monster movie elements they used in the previous hybrid dinosaurs for the Giganotosaurus. And as a result, it doesn't feel like a genuine threat. Just something forced to fight the T-Rex for a cool action sequence. The rest of the film also has a severe lack of stakes. None of the characters feel like they're in any real danger. And I don't want this coming across like there needs to be people dying in films like these to feel like there's any danger. Believe it or not, there's ways to make events in a movie feel absolutely terrifying without killing anyone off. Regardless of what happened in it, the movie doesn't even bother trying to sell that the events the characters went through were hell. In the original Jurassic Park, Tim and Lex were chased, nearly crushed, nearly drowned in mud water. Tim was thrown into a tree and electrocuted when climbing a fence. They get chased some more, and you could tell these events were traumatic and terrifying just by looking at them by the very end of it. They look like they've been through hell, and these are just the kids. Look at all of the characters by the beginning of the final conflict of Dominion. They look fine, like they've barely been scratched. They just got done running away from what the film is forcing us to believe is a bloodthirsty dinosaur, and it looks like they just took a normal fucking hike in the preserve. There's no stakes, no reason to be scared for them, no reason to see the dinosaurs as a genuine threat, and therefore the horror you felt in the original trilogy is completely non-existent in this newer one. It seems like the Jurassic films have been pretty hit or miss when it comes to dinosaur horror. So let's focus on something that's not the Jurassic films, but still had some level of mainstream exposure. 65 is not just a bad dinosaur movie, it's a bad attempt at horror. At least in my opinion. Oh yeah, opinions. This video's full of them. If you think otherwise of anything I'm saying here, you can let me know down in the comments below. Anyways, 65 is about a pilot from an extraterrestrial race of beings from planet Samsare, who is on an intergalactic expedition transporting a bunch of people with him before his ship is struck by asteroids. They crash land on a prehistoric Earth where he and a little girl, the only other survivor of the crash, have to survive several of the disgusting looking predatory dinosaurs. The movie is somewhat in the same line as the Jurassic films, where it's not really an outright horror movie, but it's mostly adjacent to it. At most, a sci-fi action thriller, but this is the closest example we have to a dinosaur horror movie that's not associated with the Jurassic World franchise, and has had some level of mainstream exposure, especially since some pretty big names were attached to this project. Though, I'll be honest, it doesn't feel very action-based, because my personal biggest gripe with this movie is that they took this grandiose and pulp concept, they had a pretty decent budget to work with, and had some pretty big names attached to it, and the most they could shit out was a boring, slow-burning, big-budget creature feature with a very generic story. Now that's not to say those qualities are inherently bad, because they're not. There are plenty of slow-burning sci-fi horror and/or thriller movies that work because they typically have a great payoff. One of my favorite examples is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. The movie is very quiet and slow in some parts, but it's effective because it builds up paranoia and mystery, since the idea is that you don't know which character to trust. On top of that, when the movie does eventually pick up, the sequence feels much more impactful and hard-hitting, especially with its really cool effects and gore. This, in my opinion at least, is a good payoff for the waiting we have to do for it. If you want a more recent example, another movie that I really ended up liking was Jordan Peele's Nope from 2022. This sci-fi horror was also very much a slow burner in some parts, but the payoff with this movie are its themes, which are about exploitation and spectacles that are played out in ways that, like The Thing, are gruesome and uncomfortable and hard-hitting, making it much more impactful. The problem with 65 is that despite also feeling like a slow burner of a sci-fi thriller movie, there is no real payoff. The themes are very generic and the dinosaurs look ugly. Because the dinosaurs are the main stars of the show here, and no doubt people are going to ask me about them anyways, here's my personal stance on the dinosaurs of 65. They're bad. I don't like them. No, I don't think the style of ugly, gnarly dinosaurs is inherently bad. No, that doesn't mean I think 65 did a good job with this style. And yes, there is a right way to do this and make it interesting. We have proof of previous works that have used this kind of style before and have done something cool and/or unique with it, even if they aren't perfect. Just off the top of my head, 2005's King Kong and Second Extinction are perfect examples. They use the aesthetic of ugly, gnarly dinosaurs to portray a really gruesome and brutal world that they're set in. But they did cool things with them. In King Kong, the dinosaurs were descendants of real-world ones. In Second Extinction, they're mutated monsters with various different abilities. In 65, they're just boring. In my opinion, the 65 dinosaurs look unimaginative and very derivative of already existing designs, or at the very least, elements of already existing designs. And this is funny because some of the recent concept art that was revealed not too long ago literally shows decent ideas for the ugly feral dinosaurs. These dinosaurs look unique, they look distinctive, and they fall under the ugly gnarly style they clearly wanted to go for. Yet, they opted for these instead. Maybe they liked it themselves, and that's fine, but again, in my opinion, these just don't look that good to me. Okay, I've been shit talking a lot about modern mainstream dinosaur horror, but the point I'm trying to make here is that in the grand scheme of things, they leave a lot to be desired. None of these works ever try to explore new grounds or push boundaries or take risks, and as a result, it feels like watered down versions of what we used to have. And in other cases, like Carnosaur and Dino Crisis, their presence just kind of fizzled out into non-existence. And it's weird considering how many people I've personally heard talking about how they want these IPs to have some kind of return. Many have been asking for a remake of Carnosaur that's more faithful to the novel, considering its potential to be adapted into a movie. And there's even more people that have asked for a Dino Crisis remake, remaster, or continuation. With this abundance of constant demand, it was only a matter of time before fans would take things into their own hands and start creating their own projects inspired by these previous IPs. Video games are a great example of these kinds of projects, because throughout the 2010s, both dinosaurs and indie horror games skyrocketed in popularity. Not only was the new Jurassic World trilogy throwing dinosaurs back into public view, but indie game developers had also showcased to people that a little can go a long way when you have a basic yet effective idea for a good horror game. The two components were bound to meet at some point, especially since this new wave of mainstream Jurassic content had inspired several people to make indie video games about it. This was also, in part, due to the fact that, despite the demand for more varied Jurassic World games, there was a severe lack of them for some reason. Throughout the latter half of the 2010s and early 2020s, we had a few mobile games, a couple of VR games, and we had the park building simulator Jurassic World Evolution and its sequel. But in comparison to its 90s predecessors, which had several and very diverse games made for each movie, this was a rather piss-poor lineup of games. People wanted to explore Jurassic World, so several of the indie games that were made were exploration-based. But with the return of the more horror-centric themes and aesthetics from the previous Jurassic films being showcased in Fallen Kingdom especially, it got people thinking of the potential for a horror-themed Jurassic Park game, and so the fanbase started chanting out their cries for one, only for their words to fall on deaf ears. Eventually, a few indie games that would fulfill these demands would be in production by individuals who sought to give this experience to fans who very much wanted it. It seems like the appearance for some of these games would start around the beginning of 2018, with a few Jurassic Park-inspired games made by online user Unity 5 Games. The first of these games was simply called Raptors, released in January of 2018, which is set in the jungles of Isla Sorna, where you're forced to dodge and run away from a pack of Jurassic Park 3 velociraptors. The following month, another raptor-based game was released called Raptors in the Kitchen. You're thrown straight into the raptor kitchen scene from Jurassic Park, and instead of watching it play out on your TV, you yourself now have to avoid the velociraptors. If the situation of the scene wasn't already terrifying enough, playing out a simulation of yourself in that very scene is bound to make you shit yourself. On their Reddit posts promoting their game, user Unity 5 Games responded to a comment explaining that their game was mainly just a Raptor AI test that they managed to make themselves. Later that year, in around May or June, Unity 5 Games would release another Jurassic Park horror experience that they spent a little over a month creating called T-Rex Breakout. But instead of reliving the kitchen scene, you now have to avoid the T-Rex as the game simulates its breakout scene from the movie. There's really not much to the games, and admittedly they look kind of buggy, but they're still effective in not just showcasing dinosaurs' potential in a horror scenario, but also showcases the kind of response fans were having towards this demand of wanting the Jurassic franchise to lean more into its thriller side. A couple of years later in 2020, a more elaborate JP indie game was in the process of being developed, but from my knowledge was never finished and is no longer available for download. This was Jurassic Park S, made by Ivan Romanov, and just based on watching a couple of playthroughs from other content creators like The Gaming Beaver and Best in Slot, there was only one level made. It starts with you playing as Robert Muldoon, collecting eggs from around the park and encountering some of the dinosaurs from the movie. It seems like a very simple exploration and collection game. That is, until the tone changes as you progress through it. Eventually, after you collect all of the eggs, you make your way through the dark tunnels of the park, and things aren't as they seem anymore. As you explore the areas of the park hidden away from the public, you discover very strange things like weird control panels and an old-fashioned Jeep behind a locked door that just kind of disassembles itself for literally no reason. At one point, there's a weird figure in a wheelchair behind another closed door, and at another point, you can hear the echoes of someone crying. Also, it should be noted that the game starts off with the Jurassic Park logo, but it seems that when you enter this darker area, it changes from Jurassic Park to Silent Park. Clearly meant to point out that Silent Hill definitely inspired this game, which should tell you all that you need to know about it. Unfortunately, the game was never fully finished. But this is all surface level, because there's been a massive influx of these kinds of games that are not attached to the Jurassic franchise that have been announced and or released in the last 6 or 7 years. Oakwood, Goner, Deathground, Project Ferocious, Compound Fracture, Fossil Fuel, Instinction, The Lost Wild, Paleophage, Primal Omen, The Last of the Core, Dino Trauma, Dino Break, Echoes of Extinction, Fossil Fuel 2, Unknown Tapes, and literally right as I was writing the script for this video, there's a demo of another new dinosaur horror game called Tempest Triad. There has been so many of these games, and if you want to know where the inspiration is coming from, look no further than Dino Crisis. Jurassic Park wasn't the only thing being popularized during this time of dinosaur media resurgence. It's clear that Jurassic's potential in horror had reminded people of dinosaur IPs that were actual straight-up horror and did it better, like Dino Crisis. In fact, there have been several attempts from fans in the last few or so years alone at remaking Dino Crisis in some way or another. To name a few, there was Team Arclay's fan-made Dino Crisis game that was announced back in 2019. Team Arclay is a small gaming development group that's dedicated their platforms to making fan recreations of video games, and about 4 or 5 years ago, Dino Crisis was going to be their newest project. The game was planned to be made with Unreal Engine 4, and it actually looked pretty promising. It even had a decent level of coverage from video game news outlets and content creators, but after a little while, the devs just stopped making updates about the game. And soon, everything about the game was wiped from their YouTube channel. They would later explain this year to some comments on their Twitter page why they stopped working on the game. Dino Crisis was paused for 2 years due to lack of resources and personnel to develop it. Then we started Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 3, and they are the projects currently in development, and it is impossible for us to develop a third game in parallel. Unfortunate, but Dino Crisis has been brought back to life in other ways, like Darkness Valtier's Dino Crisis mod that they made for Resident Evil 3, which reskins your character as Regina and all of the enemies as dinosaurs within the game. There was also Teaser Play's concept trailer for a Dino Crisis remake, which was never meant to be an actual announcement for a fan-made recreation of the game. It was only ever meant to showcase the capabilities of Unreal Engine 5 using the resources within the platform to make a whole Dino Crisis concept trailer out of it. In 2022, there was a short, partial fan-made remake of Dino Crisis 2 called Dino Crisis 2 Jungle of Silence by Stefano Cognani. According to his site, this is a short new mission from the original story of Dino Crisis 2, the original game. I had fun to recreate the environments and dinosaurs in 3D in a TPS game. Enjoy and help me bring a possible remake alive. And that goal would eventually come true. Kind of. Cognani would continue to make another partial remake of Dino Crisis this year, this time of the first game, and it was released right as I was recording this script. Titled Dino Crisis Rebirth, the game is not meant to be a one-for-one remake of the original Dino Crisis, as described on Cognani's official page for it. According to them, this project is purely inspired by the original 1999 game, but it does not represent a full remake. In any case, it's a perfect example that, to this day, people still adore this video game franchise. And if it's not enough that it's shown through these several attempted remakes or recreations, then just look through some of the many games I listed earlier. In many cases, these games have been considered spiritual successors or spiritual sequels to it, and in some of these cases, it makes a lot of sense. Dino Crisis was centered around a special ops team exploring an abandoned research facility as their main objective. Many of the games I just listed have taken this basic concept and reworked it in their own ways to create their own stories. The 2021 game Fossil Fuel, for example, developed by Dangerous Bob Studio, has you traversing through the Sierra Research Institute that's based on the Great Sitskin Island in Alaska. After successfully cloning two extinct animals, the Sumatran rhino and the dodo bird, the next logical step for the facility was to put their money and efforts into creating dinosaurs, which they were also successful in. You play a newly enlisted game warden who shows up just in time for things to go wrong, and the science experiments performed in the base escape, including dinosaurs, giant bugs, and even dinosaur-human hybrids. A few years later, in 2024, the game was followed by its sequel, Fossil Fuel 2, which sends the player back to the Sierra Research Institute where they encounter even more prehistoric threats. The Last of the Core from 2023 also has the same basic concept, as you are a soldier who's sent to a science facility to investigate an incident that involves a deadly onslaught of dinosaurs. Games like the up-and-coming Paleophage change up the abandoned science facility setting, the game instead being based in an urban city center, but still being overrun by dinosaurs and giant bugs. In keeping up with the Dino Crisis spirit, however, the game promises a mix of puzzle solving and dinosaur shooting as you progress through it. A similar concept can be played out in Dino Break from 2023, a game set in a metropolitan city roamed by carnivorous dinosaurs that you, as the player, have to shoot through to survive. In a more recent example, you also have Unknown Tapes, an upcoming 2025 game that's hopping on the popular found footage trend that's been making its rounds on internet video horror content, of which we'll definitely be talking about a little bit more later. But according to the game's description on Steam, both Dino Crisis and Outlast were inspirations for it. What sets this game apart from the others is that it feels like you're literally looking through the lens of an old video camera, as if you're recording your experience as you progress through the story. You, the player, are exploring some sort of research complex at night, learning of its mysteries as you try and stealthily make your way through areas containing deadly dinosaurs. Based on the footage from the demo alone, you'll be running into dinosaurs like Compsognathus, raptors, and even Spinosaurus. It just goes to show just how influential this 90s video game franchise is to modern dinosaur horror games, and it's perfect to use in a news title. Gaming news articles definitely love using it in their headlines, there's no doubt about that. The greatest example of something like this is Instinction. Instinction, announced by Hashbane Interactive, aiming to be Dino Crisis looks like the next gen spiritual successor to Dino Crisis. Instinction could be the Dino Crisis successor to Dino Crisis. And that Dino Crisis, you get the idea. But to be fair, the Dino Crisis aesthetic is definitely present. The game's been in development for a few years now, being first announced in January of 2021. But the first real trailer came out later that year in June during E3, showcasing several Dino Crisis-like elements including familiar architecture, like the military-like complex and laser doors, and there's familiar scenes of having to shoot your way past some dinosaurs and being stealthy to avoid others. Despite some of the Dino Crisis-inspired aspects, the game itself is looking to be quite different. In fact, according to an interview with Richard Gold, lead developer of Hashbane Interactive, the company behind Instinction, when he's asked what other influences Dino Crisis played aside from just the dinosaurs, he responds with, "Firstly, let me address this broad term of spiritual successor here. We obviously all loved and still appreciate what Dino Crisis was, and what it meant to a segment of gamers that had the pleasure to experience it in its heyday. We just intend to recreate what we all felt back then, and also instill that experience in a new generation of gamers. Secondly, Dino Crisis is and always will retain its own identity. We like what it was and have no intentions to distract from that. We just know that so many of us have waited too long, and while there have been other tribute attempts at remaking Dino Crisis, no indie developer could get away with taking over the IP. That's one of the reasons we are offering mod support, as well as character customization in-game. If you want to call your character Regina and make the character resemble an early Dino Crisis character, you can. As far as the story goes, according to the game's Steam page, it's going to be centered around Izzy, who travels to and explores the Yucatan jungles and discovers a civilization coexisting with dinosaurs. Speaking of the dinosaurs, as far as they go, it seems the developers are keen on keeping them as scientifically accurate as possible, as they've disclosed in the past that the models featured in their previous trailers and promotional materials are getting overhauled with updated designs. Dino Crisis-like horror aesthetics, first-person exploration, and accurate dinosaur models. Instinction seems exactly like the kind of dinosaur game people have wanted, and it definitely seems like the kind of dinosaur horror experience they've been asking for as well. But it's hardly the only promising contender. Mainstream content as a whole typically follows specific formulas and restrictions to stay on the safe side of things, and as a result, the things that people actually want are oftentimes ignored. And that's just on a general basis, so imagine something as specific as dinosaur horror content. Well, people from these independent and niche communities have listened and supplied what the mainstream simply won't. In the dinosaur community, there has been a demand for more scientific accuracy and realistic animal behaviors portrayed in dinosaurs of these recent projects. And this is due, in part at least, to the fact that when the topic of dinosaur horror comes up, there's usually the argument being made that realistic dinosaurs can be just as terrifying, if not more terrifying, than the outdated monster movie style that's been used time and time again. So aside from Instinction, there's been a couple of other games that are aiming to push out this kind of accuracy. Another up-and-coming game with this goal is The Lost Wild, announced back in October of 2021 by Great Ape Games. A cat-and-mouse style survival game that puts players in the middle of a forest roaming with primordial life, where you're forced to encounter, fight off, and avoid dinosaurs using nothing but the resources around you and your own wits. And according to the official site, The Lost Wild is an immersive and cinematic dinosaur game that captures the reverence and terror of nature's most magnificent beasts. Come face to face with dinosaurs that behave like wild animals, not monsters. Other games, like Echoes of Extinction by Extinct Studios, also tackles a more realistic look for the dinosaurs in their game, and offers a unique experience as players are going to be given the option to play as either humans or dinosaurs. The game is set on a prehistoric island, where man and beast walk side by side, but are far from peaceful and must compete against each other for their own survival. But not everyone is on board with scientific accuracy. Some people want a more grungy, gnarly look to their dinosaurs to fit that horror aesthetic, and are willing to sacrifice accuracy to make them look more intimidating. Games, like the intense action-based horror FPS Project Ferocious developed by Omniog, were inspired by works like King Kong to achieve the grungy look for their dinosaurs. But there are several of these games that have dinosaurs with much more decrepit and rabid looks. The futuristic mutant dinosaurs of Systemic Reaction's Second Extinction are a good example of this, though it's more of an intense action shooter than a horror game. Though the developers did a good job making their dinosaurs look pretty intimidating with their grotesque but cool designs. As much as I enjoy either side of the coin when it comes to accurate and inaccurate dinosaur designs, I like to see examples of works that give us the best of both worlds. For example, Jaw Drop Games' Deathground, which was announced all the way back in 2020. Given from the first reveal trailer, the raptors were shown to be naked and scaly, later given plumage according to an update posted on the game's Steam page on October 1st of 2021, which actually makes them look much more wild than their previous designs. According to the developers, there were 3 reasons for this change. 1, the team was interested in taking on a scientific approach. 2, despite being inspired by other raptor designs in previous forms of paleomedia, they wanted to have their own unique raptor designs. And 3, they feel pretty confident in being able to make their dinosaurs feathered and still scary. This is actually an important detail to bring up, because the idea of feathered dinosaurs being scary, or used in horror-related media, has been a topic of discourse for a while, with some seeming to believe that scaly dinosaurs are far scarier than ones donned in plumage. Given the current state of dinosaur media and the ongoing demand for scientific accuracy in paleo-fictional works, many of the independent contemporary horror projects I'm going to be talking about today will continue to showcase and defend this stance. So this topic will definitely be brought up again in this video. In my personal opinion, while I think both looks have the potential to be genuinely scary, I feel like people tend to forget that it's not just how something looks that makes them scary, but also how they behave, move, and sound. You'll see as we progress through the video, as there will be plenty of examples that also showcase what I mean. But I'm also of the opinion that including elements of both can make for a unique and interesting dinosaur. Early concept art for the feathered raptors of Deathground definitely shows potential in these kinds of designs, though I will admit the final product isn't the best looking in my opinion. Regardless, I like the aesthetic it's attempting to go for. Then there are the games that are very much inspired by the dinosaur and or horror games of the 90s, not just in terms of tone and concept, but also in terms of style. Games like Iteria Games' Compound Fracture and Phobia Interactive's Dino Trauma aim to bring back that 90s retro look into their modern dinosaur horror games. In the case of Dino Trauma specifically, it was inspired by a multitude of 90s horror and sci-fi games like Dino Crisis, Turok, Doom, Quake, and Blood. As far as the story goes, the player is thrown into a science research facility overran by prehistoric creatures that you now have to shoot down in bloody and gory fashion. You'll have the opportunity to run into an arsenal of weaponry placed throughout the game to use against your onslaught of enemies, offering a more action horror-based adventure game. Compound Fracture seems to be offering a similar experience, as you are an enforcer assigned from the OSEA to check out the claims of illegal activities being done by a company called Chronogas. Turns out the employees of this company had been messing around with time travel, meaning the enforcer now has to pick up a weapon and fuck some dinosaurs up. It's not uncommon for games, or media as a whole, to follow this trend of bringing back old aesthetics and styles for modern projects. In fact, this idea actually plays a huge role in some of the other contemporary projects featured in this video, and that's analog horror. That's right, believe it or not, dinosaurs have been integrated in this viral horror media trend. And while it's hard to pinpoint an exact starting date for this trend that included dinosaurs, one of the earliest examples I recall being told about was a very small and obscure series called The Extinction Archives made by YouTube user HellyG. The first video of which was uploaded on March 26, 2022. There's only 2 videos on this series uploaded to their channel, and from what I can tell from their description, it seems that at least one of the reasons for these videos was meant to promote the creator's book, which in my opinion is pretty clever, and the story itself is somewhat interesting. Again, there's only 2 videos, so there's not much to work with. But from what I can gather, it takes place in the 80s and features a series of videos taken by the uploader, who compiled them together and re-edited them to contain the truth about dinosaurs that still may be roaming around in the modern day. In the first video, a simple dinosaur presentation is featured that goes through individual ones while stating facts about them. According to the video's description, the tape was meant to be for the kids at an elementary school, but it was stolen and re-edited by the uploader because they wanted to insert evidence of another dinosaur that wasn't included before. The presentation goes on with all of the normal dinosaurs until it reaches a bonus round, where it reveals a mysterious dinosaur called the Raptor before abruptly ending. The second video, titled Archive Extinction 2, the Yosemite National Park Incident, starts off with some found footage of someone walking around in a forested area at night. Strange sounds of some unknown creature can be heard nearby, forcing the hiker to run away. But this doesn't work, as they're hit by something from behind, but before we can see what it is, the video transitions to a survival camping guide for the reopening of the Yosemite National Park, which had been closed for 6 months for undisclosed reasons. The guide goes through all of the precautions for guests to follow that are necessary for a safe trip in their park, but some of these precautions seem a little strange. For example, within your bag of essentials that the guide recommends all guests to bring, they also recommend a handgun, especially if you plan to stay overnight. But if this wasn't strange enough, the guide also goes through some of the dangerous wildlife you can encounter, like cougars, wolves, bears, and even a dinosaur. The video ends with text that states how, in 1987, a corpse of a camper named Eric Davison was found by others with a picture that revealed what had killed him. A picture of a raptor of some sort. While not perfect, this was definitely a decent precursor to the huge rush of dinosaur analog horror projects that we would end up getting just a little bit later. However, this popularity of dinosaur analog horror was mainly expressed through that of Jurassic Park, thus giving birth to the era of Jurassic Park analog horror videos. Videos that used the more mysterious and horror-centric elements of this franchise and created videos about it in the same style as analog horror videos. And it makes sense, considering the first couple of movies took place during the tail end of that analog media era, so they fit that aesthetic well. However, the many analog horror videos made on Jurassic Park heavily vary in quality, but we'll get more into that later. If you're anything like me, you're probably not very well versed with the analog horror trend. Personally for me, it's not my favorite kind of horror, so for a while I just kind of ignored it, but for the sake of this video, I did end up watching, or at least try to watch, some of what's considered the best of what this subgenre has to offer, to get myself better prepared for what to expect, and to help explain what analog horror is to anyone who isn't familiar with it. That being said, I still feel like I need to hand the introduction of this segment to someone who's more knowledgeable with analog horror than me. And one person that I know who's a massive nerd when it comes to creepy shit is my girlfriend Danny. So I'm gonna let her take over for a bit to explain analog horror. Take it away, Danny.
Hello, it's me again. Don't worry, I won't be cursing up a storm this round. As Diego has probably already told you, this is just a small introduction to what analog horror is. To put it simply, analog horror is a genre of film or filmmaking that focuses on the aesthetic and look of analog tech. This includes, but is not limited to, the look of old VHS tapes, CCTV footage that predates the mid-2000s, image artifacting, and the mimicry of outdated recording equipment. The genre itself is appreciated for its unique take on storytelling presentation, as it isn't always told in linear sequence. Where a film or a book may usually tell a story from beginning to end, with exception of course, we always know there's an exception to the rule, a story told using analog forms of presentation may be told in fragments. This leaves piecing the story together in the hands of the viewers or flat out up to interpretation depending on who the writer is. Some of the first mainstream analog horror titles include The Ring, 1998 original Japanese release, and The Blair Witch Project, 1998. The Blair Witch Project focuses more on the found footage aspect that analog horror is known for, the film itself being shot from the perspective of the main characters as they record their ill-fated adventure. The Ring, on the other hand, focuses on a cursed videotape that leads to the death of the viewer, thus making the tape itself the harbinger of the film's monster. The success of these movies further led to the genre's continued growth over the years. With the start of the 2010s and the growing popularity of the internet, new series took root, and this time the creators had direct interaction and input from the viewers. The dawn of the decade saw the creation of No Through Road and Marble Hornets, both series simultaneously released in 2009. The two early ARGs, alternate reality games, were stories told through the leftover tapes found in the camcorders of college students or supposedly missing young men. This is where analog horror bled into the world of the previously mentioned ARGs. Those, however, are a video for another day. As the years progressed, the emergence of countless new series have exploded to the very near point of oversaturation. That didn't mean they weren't well made and well received though. Local 58, 2015, The Walton Files, 2022, The Mandela Catalog, 2021, The Backrooms, 2022, and one of the newest to the game, Greylock, 2024, are a mere handful of the titles that have set the bar for analog horror at its best. This is a very short introduction of what analog horror is and where it started. If I'm honest, I could go on about some of these series and movies forever. I left out a few too, and I know that, trust me. But that's not what this video is about. It's about dinosaur horror that happens to fall into this fun little subgenre. With that, I'll let Diego take back over. I just wanted to have a little fun and butt in one more time. Y'all have fun now.
Thank you very much to Danny for that intro. Now that you've got a feel for what analog horror is as a whole, we can answer the question of, what is Jurassic Park analog horror? Well, it's just like most of the analog horror projects that Danny explained just now. Basically, it can be a series of tapes, videos, documents, and the like that records various disturbing events involving the dinosaurs and/or the shady practices done by InGen, and are done typically within the continuity of the Jurassic Park universe, be it the novels or the movies. So now there's the question, how does Jurassic Park fit into it? Well, depending on who you ask, it doesn't. Before we get deeper into that question, let's briefly go over the history of Jurassic Park analog horror. Considering the Jurassic Park franchise was within the era of not just analog tech, but also the popular movie inspirations for the analog horror trend, it was only a matter of time before people were going to combine the two elements. And believe it or not, this actually happened years before the current trend of JP analog horror. Back in 2018, when Universal was heavily marketing Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, they were also putting a lot of focus on their previous Jurassic trilogy, which was something that wasn't as prominent in the marketing for 2015's Jurassic World. A huge part of it was because the release of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was also around the time of Jurassic Park's 25th year anniversary, along with the fact that cinematic universes were very popular at this point in time. As a result, fans were not only given a lot of legacy-themed merchandise that were focused on the dinosaurs, characters, and events from the previous trilogy, but there were also bigger attempts to connect those elements back into this newer trilogy. This was seen in some of the marketing for Fallen Kingdom, with one big example being a 6-second animated clip showing another perspective of the San Diego incident from The Lost World in the style of a found footage video. Apparently, this clip was leaked by the Dinosaur Protection Group, which was likely due to their article covering the Gene Guard Act back in 2018. The clip was made by animator Manuel Bejarano, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, who later on in February of 2023 would reveal another animation they made featuring a more up-close angle of the Lost World T-Rex in San Diego, also in the style of found footage. According to their Instagram post, the clip was created to be featured in Jurassic World Dominion, but it ended up not being used. Regardless, we have a really cool example of Jurassic Park found footage years before the recent trend would become popular. Universal would do more with this kind of style later on in their marketing for Dominion, like with their series of found footage dinosaur videos from their Dino Tracker site showcasing all sorts of dinosaur encounters being made by the general public, and their employee orientation series that guides new InGen employees through different aspects of Jurassic Park. But unlike the videos that we're going to be looking at here in a bit, these orientation videos make no attempt to be unsettling or scary. As far as I've seen, not much would really be done with this trend again for Jurassic Park until 2022, when some of the first examples of JP analog horror would be spotted. As far as my personal history with Jurassic Park analog horror goes, I was first told about it by someone in my comments section or Discord server as a suggestion for me to cover for the channel, and by the time I got around to it, there was a playlist made on YouTube that had about 10 videos made by various different creators. I ended up covering those videos in my own video for my channel, and since then, that playlist had increased from 10 videos to 200 at the time that I wrote this script. So quick correction, this playlist of Jurassic Park analog horror videos, which was put together by a channel called Useless Mouth 12, is actually only one of 3 total playlists, each containing about 200 videos all about Jurassic Park analog horror. Meaning, instead of 200 videos, there's more like 600. I'll be honest, I didn't go through every single video in these playlists, because I didn't realize they existed until after I recorded everything. So maybe my opinions on this video trend might change depending on what they might contain. If I do end up making a follow-up video, I'll likely dedicate a segment talking about some of the other videos on these playlists, depending on whether or not they're even worth talking about. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Let's get back to it. Now, I'm not saying I contributed to this trend, but I definitely contributed to this trend. I mean, look how many damn views this stupid video got. Amongst the first 10 videos that I covered, the first ones that I talked about, and from what I can tell, the first ones of their kind, were made by YouTube user Rustico. The first one is called InGen's Hostile Dinosaur Safety Video VHS, and the way it's structured is very simple. As I explained in the beginning of the video, Rustico's video starts off as a normal orientation video meant to be viewed by new InGen employees to show them the proper protocols of handling or avoiding dinosaurs that end up becoming hostile towards them or the other guests. In the first section, called HVA Emergency, the video uses a Triceratops as an example in a scenario where it might be attacking one of the tour vehicles. It goes on to explain that should there be an encounter such as this one, you should use the radios within the Jeep to call for security, to which they will be able to play a frequency that chases the dinosaur off. Okay, pretty standard stuff so far. The video continues to the next section, titled CBOE Emergency, where it explains the electrical fences surrounding the park and dinosaur enclosures, and how the power may succumb to the tropical storms, causing possible breakouts from the carnivorous dinosaurs. This is when the video goes apeshit. As soon as it mentions the carnivorous dinosaurs, the video abruptly transitions to a loud and distorted montage of disturbing imagery of the T-Rex, raptors, the Giganotosaurus, different in-universe Jurassic Park characters, and some one-off scary images that have nothing to do with Jurassic Park, but are put in there for the scare factor. The video then ends with this InGen warning emblem with an automated voice in the background saying,
"Viewing of this tape is prohibited. Discard it immediately."
And really, this is what a lot of these videos consist of. I've gone through most, if not all of these videos on this playlist, and from what I can see, they're typically structured in a similar way as Rustico's video. It starts off as a seemingly innocent orientational or training video before they begin to mention the dinosaurs, mainly the carnivorous ones, before transitioning to disturbing imagery or jump scares of the dinosaurs or the characters that's meant to display some sort of cryptic message that's, more times than not, just making references to the movies, novels, or some other project relating to Jurassic Park. There's one video that ends with the message Losa Raptor, which is what the mauled island worker said to the doctors on the mainland clinic in the beginning of the first Jurassic Park book. Another shows off the camouflaging Carnotaurus that appeared in the second Jurassic Park book, The Lost World. There's one talking about the Triceratops that utilizes the image of the decapitated Triceratops featured in the Project Evolution horror attraction. There's another that even uses the Jurassic Park ride. These videos can be hit or miss with the quality, but I will admit there is a good amount of creativity with a lot of them. Some of them also incorporate clips from Jurassic Park video games, and for the most part, it's actually pretty creative and effective. One of Rustico's videos uses clips from that fan-made game I talked about earlier, Raptors in the Kitchen. This one, by YouTube user The Jake, uses clips from an older Jurassic Park game called Jurassic Park Interactive. And it actually fits with the older style media aesthetic that these kinds of videos are going for. There's also another channel that I'll go more in depth with later called CD Jurassic that I believe uses clips from Jurassic World Evolution in one of their Raptor videos. And of course, there's plenty of them that take advantage of the full-on sequences that play out in the movie and novel that are genuinely meant to be horror-oriented. For example, many of these videos reference the baby-eating Compsognathuses from the first Jurassic Park book, and others like referencing the Dilophosaurus attack from the movie. Unsurprisingly, carnivores are the main candidates for these videos, but the main ones that I've seen are usually the Velociraptors, the T-Rex, and the Spinosaurus. As I mentioned earlier though, there are other dinosaurs used like the Compys, Dilophosaurus, Carnotaurus, and so on. Not all of these videos are necessarily mashups of disturbing imagery, but a lot of the scares are very in-your-face. It's not uncommon for there to be jump scares in these videos, but I think the funniest part about these jump scares is that some of the dinosaurs' faces are edited in a way that's supposed to make them more disturbing, but it ends up making them look more goofy than anything. Also, before I continue this section of the video, I'm going to be making a lot of jokes and critiques on these Jurassic Park analog horror videos, as my goal is to look at what works and doesn't work from my and other people's perspective. But before I do this, I just want to point out a couple of things. Yes, I'm aware that these videos were likely made by people who just wanted to experiment, and or were just dicking around with their editing software to see what a Jurassic Park analog horror video might look like. And in some cases throughout this playlist, there are definitely some that are more satirical and self-aware than others. So I will definitely keep this aspect in mind. However, I'm wholeheartedly a believer in the fact that if you put something out there for the public to see, there's free reign to criticize it. That being said, I'm in no way holding myself as being the authority that determines what makes a good or bad analog horror video. I'm simply stating what I feel personally works for me as a good analog horror video, or more specifically, what makes a good Jurassic Park horror project. But I also want to look at this through the lens of others as well, as I also think other perspectives matter. After I made my Jurassic Park analog horror video a while back, I remember receiving comments that criticized the videos I was covering in that playlist. And I don't want to ignore these critiques because it does bring to light some of the issues that we see in many of these videos now. Some people don't seem very on board with the idea of Jurassic Park for an analog horror series because there are several aspects to it that just don't fit the medium. For example, a lot of the popular analog horror series that are out there utilize supernatural, spiritual, and or otherworldly elements to make their stories work. Because of these elements, it makes sense why the recordings, tapes, and or documents to these respective series are structured the way they are. Take something like Gemini Home Entertainment for example. In this analog horror series, the story is being told through a series of PSAs, commercials, home videos, and survival guides from videotapes all distributed by a fictional media company called Gemini Home Entertainment. Put together, the video series tells a story involving parasitic extraterrestrials that are attempting to infect and take over the human race. But the way the story is executed implies that the humans are well aware of this invasion, and thus, the different production companies of these various videos that Gemini Home Entertainment is distributing are promoting their products around this knowledge. What makes these videos at least partly disturbing is that this has become the norm in the world this series takes place in. So when the videos eventually transition to something unsettling or scary, it's not just meant to be there for the scare factor. Depending on what video you're watching, it's meant to be a warning or an announcement or even a message for the extraterrestrials themselves, but they just happen to feel or appear disturbing to the viewer. In Jurassic Park analog horror, a lot of that same feeling of disturbance that is trying to be replicated feels very forced. Which is strange considering dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park universe have become the norm as well by the end of the first trilogy. Meaning something like a Jurassic Park analog horror series in the same style as Gemini Home Entertainment could actually work. But then you have other analog horror series like Marble Hornets and the Mandela Catalog that imply a more supernatural component at play, which explains the manipulation and tampering of the tapes, images, and other media that play out in those series. The problem with Jurassic Park analog horror for a lot of people, and admittedly myself, is that a lot of these elements just don't feel compatible with this franchise. First off, Jurassic Park is a much more grounded story than many of these analog horror series, so the whole supernatural or otherworldly aspects feel completely out of place for it. Along with that, there's other components in these videos that don't feel realistic, and at other points they come off as goofy, like the constant need to make the dinosaurs the villains of the story. I'm not saying they shouldn't necessarily be used for this reason, but I think treating them as normal animals would be just as effective. But there are some videos on here that make the dinosaurs full-on self-aware bad guys, and it's less scary and more funny to me. Then of course, like I mentioned earlier, there's the weirdly edited faces of some of the dinosaurs to make them look more scary, and I will admit, in some cases it is somewhat effective, but in other cases, it's over-exaggerated to the point where it's just weird or unintentionally funny looking. You also see those same kind of warped, distorted, uncanny faces being done on people a lot throughout these videos. And it's clear the inspiration for this came from works like the Mandela Catalog, the Walton Files, and/or the Smile Tapes. But the problem with this element is that in the context of those other analog horror stories that I just listed, the warped, uncanny faces actually make sense. In the case of something like the Mandela Catalog, a story about demonic beings called alternates terrorizing people psychologically by shifting into their victims' doppelgangers, these warped faces are meant to showcase the uncanniness of the alternates when they attempt to assume the identities of their victims. In the Smile Tapes, the story is centered around victims that took a black market drug called the Smile Drug, which turns out to contain an extraterrestrial fungus found in space. As a result, this drug sends them into a violent manic state, with their main symptoms being their wide, unsettling grins, uncontrollable laughter, and facial deterioration, explaining why the use of these disturbing faces are relevant for this story. Then there's the structure of the video itself. Many of these videos are meant to be portrayed as training or orientation tapes for InGen employees. Yet they're spliced with mysterious cryptic messages and disturbing images or found footage of the victims of the dinosaurs or the aftermath of an attack. To some extent, sure. Realistically, there probably would be some examples displayed of what might happen when InGen workers don't follow certain protocols, and how it might lead to injury and even death. But there's a fine line between that and showing blacked out images of the bodies of workers and guests who have been killed by the dinosaurs. Obviously, this is meant for the scare factor of the video, so I doubt we're supposed to give it this much thought, but in terms of wanting a realistic approach to Jurassic Park analog horror, these elements come off as illogical and misplaced, so I see where the criticism is coming from. It makes even less sense when a lot of these are also supposed to come off as events or incidents that InGen is trying to cover up. That in itself makes sense. If there's an accident in the park, whether it was coming from a worker or a guest, the higher-ups of the company are gonna want to cover their asses, and will likely go out of their way to protect their image, even if it means erasing evidence. But why would that evidence be spliced within footage of an orientation video that's meant to be shown to InGen employees? Does this imply someone's on the inside trying to get this information out? And if they were, why did they edit it in a way that feels enigmatic instead of just showing that information outright? Or are we trying to make sense of something that was never intended to have that much thought put into it in the first place? I don't really know, but it's still fun to think about. And then we have the general quality of the videos themselves. Most of the videos are made to have that VHS quality to it. You know, to really give it that old school videotape aesthetic. And in some cases, the filters look realistic enough. But some of the videos poorly integrate PNG images of the dinosaurs that really kill the effect. I think the worst offenders of this are the ones that try to jump scare you because of just how ridiculous it looks. Overall, a lot of the edits aren't actually that bad. I think the main criticism with them is that they just feel out of place in the videos they're in. Like when it's supposed to be a training video, but then you just get hit with a montage of scary and distorted edits for no reason. Okay, I've discussed a lot of what I and others don't think work in Jurassic Park analog horror, but that doesn't necessarily mean the medium doesn't work at all. In fact, just looking through the comments of my video covering the original videos of the playlist, it seems that there are also a lot of people that find the concept interesting. So far from what we've seen, it's just been executed poorly. So does this mean there isn't any good Jurassic Park analog horror videos? Not necessarily. Looking through the playlist, there actually were a few examples that I personally thought were executed pretty well, for the most part at least. To name a few, there was one that started off having so much potential, and that was a video called May 25th, 1997, Jurassic Park Analog Horror, uploaded by YouTube user Mr. Ceratosaur on February 11th, 2023. The video starts with some stand-up comedy. Seems a little out of place for Jurassic Park Analog Horror, that is, until the channel is suddenly interrupted by an emergency broadcast. In case you couldn't pick it up yet, this video takes place during the San Diego incident from the Lost World movie, when the T-Rex breaks out of the boat and wreaks havoc across the city. To me, this is such a good concept to explore. It gives us a little insight on the perspective of how the city of San Diego dealt with this situation in terms of protecting its citizens. And to me, this seems like a very realistic way of approaching it. Unfortunately, at least in my opinion, the video succumbs to the generic JP analog horror tropes by the end of it. The video transitions from the broadcast to the point of view of one of the residents inside their home. They look outside their window into the dark and quiet night, hearing nothing but crickets and their own heartbeat. That is, until they start hearing the footsteps of something big getting closer and closer to their house. It's too dark to see, but all of a sudden, the T-Rex jump scares you with its stupidly edited eyes. The video then cuts to the InGen logo with a distorted voice telling you to discard the tape immediately. Overall, this one wasn't that bad. I just wasn't a fan of the ending. Another one I really liked is called Tropical Storm Warning 1993 by the InGen tapes uploaded on March 18th, 2023. The InGen tapes is actually one of many channels that have dedicated their platforms solely for their Jurassic Park analog horror stories. According to the description of the first video uploaded to the channel, the story is centered around the son of an InGen security officer named Dennis Todd, who went missing in 1994. One day, a box of VHS tapes showed up at the main character's doorstep, with a note demanding him to finish the job that his father couldn't, which is making the tapes public. Overall, the videos aren't terrible. They vary in quality, but they aren't anything egregious. I definitely appreciate the attempt to make a somewhat cohesive story out of the Jurassic Park lore in the style of analog horror, but I think the most effective one on their channel has to be Tropical Storm Warning. The video starts off with a Jurassic Park commercial, as do most of the other videos on this channel, but it's abruptly interrupted by an emergency broadcast warning visitors on the island of an imminent tropical storm. The broadcast is then interrupted by an InGen security report discussing the aftermath of said storm. In the report, out of the 25,000 total visitors, there were 17 unaccounted for during the storm. Of the 17, there were 2 casualties, and unsurprisingly, they were caused by escaped assets, of which 7 total managed to get out of their enclosures during the storm. However, 3 of them were recovered, but 4 still remain loose. The rest of the guests are sent off the island while the park gets repaired. At least, that's what was said to the public. In reality, this time was taken to cover up the 2 deaths that had occurred in the park during the storm. The report continues, stating the victims' names to be Clyde and Amber Jones, who were in the outskirts of the park during the storm. They had a camera on them that revealed their cause of death. They were attacked by a raptor. What I love about this whole video is that not only does it succeed in making the whole scenario feel plausible, it also succeeds in making it feel unsettling. First off, the fact that all of this is shown through an InGen security report actually makes sense. It's not a training tape or anything that's meant to be shown to new InGen workers, it's actual classified information being shown to people who need to have certain clearance to see it. The only reason why it slipped through the cracks in the context of the overall story on the channel is because someone from the inside handed this information off to Dennis Todd's son, who now has the power to show it off to the world. The other reason why this particular video is so effective is that it's incredibly grounded and simple. There's no over-edited nonsense with overly cryptic messaging or warped images whose only purpose is to be scary. The information that's being shown is relevant to the context of the report, and it just happens to be unsettling. Of course, if guests that died within the park had taken images right before their deaths, those images would be confiscated and likely reported to the higher-ups of the security team. It makes sense for all of this to be here. And the image itself, mainly because of the context, is disturbing. It doesn't need to be edited or manipulated in a way to force us to feel unsettled by it. It doesn't need jump scares or even any sounds for that matter. Just the context alone is enough to make the whole scenario feel unnerving. And the best part is the fact that it's able to make the dinosaur feel menacing and scary without needing to completely demonize it, as a lot of these other analog horror videos like to do. But again, that's just me. If you ask me, I think some of the best Jurassic Park analog horror videos are the found footage ones. They make the most sense in the context of Jurassic Park, since realistically there would be constant video documentation on the park's assets to ensure guest safety, and there's bound to be something caught on tape that InGen might not want the public to see, like any potential dinosaur breakouts, any deaths caused by the dinosaurs, and/or unpredictable dinosaur behavior that might lead to a violent conflict. The videos that focus mainly on the found footage aspect of Jurassic Park still vary in quality, but one channel that does it well is Jurassic Park Security. Like the InGen tapes, Jurassic Park Security is also a channel that's solely centered around its own Jurassic Park analog horror story. This one being about an InGen security member who's only known as Reaper, smuggling discarded Jurassic Park videotapes that contain secrets about InGen regarding their negligence towards their employees' safety, and uploading it on the internet for the world to see. The videos show several different scenarios, and while some of them may look a little goofy, they're generally well made and show off some genuinely scary scenarios to be in, like encountering some of the larger theropod dinosaurs in the park, being chased in the hallway by a velociraptor, and even being taken by a pteranodon only to be dropped from hundreds, maybe thousands of feet in the sky. Most of the videos consist of found footage, but things take a strange turn on their 9th video on the channel uploaded on July 28, 2023, titled Jurassic Park Junior Ranger Society video, and it's probably one of the craziest Jurassic Park analog horror videos I've ever seen. The video is styled as a fun animated video guide being led by Jurassic Park's mascot, Mr. DNA, as he leads a trio of kids through the park introducing them to the dinosaurs. One by one, he offers the kids the chance to pet or feed the dinosaurs, with each kid being killed off-screen by them in a way that's both tongue-in-cheek and kind of creepy. It's definitely a unique take on Jurassic Park analog horror, and it's very much an outlier to the rest of the videos on this channel, but overall, I kinda liked what they did with it. Eventually in the story, InGen starts to catch up on what Reaper is doing and begins to threaten him back with their own cryptic and mysterious video. Eventually, the channel does seem to have a rather open-ended finale, but based on what's been posted on their community tab, it seems that there might be more to expose from InGen. Overall, I definitely think this is one of the few channels that does this trend well. There's other one-offs that I thought were promising, but while we're on the topic of channels specifically centered around Jurassic Park analog horror, I think the one that does it the best is CD Jurassic. While not actually having a continuous storyline like a lot of these other analog horror series with entire channels dedicated to them, CD Jurassic is more of an anthology of analog horror videos that aren't necessarily connected with one another outside of all of them being centered around the Jurassic Park lore. In my opinion, this channel has the most grounded series of JP analog horror videos that I think does a great job in making the scenarios feel both realistic and terrifying. In some cases, the videos are very simple too. For example, in their first video titled InGen Victims 197B JP92 Analog Horror, it's structured as an InGen incident report cataloging all of the casualties that were involved in some undisclosed incident with presumably escaped dinosaurs. The report shows a list of the victims with the last one blacked out, before going through each person's picture, the image of where their body was found, and the report showing the areas of their bodies that were struck and/or devoured by the dinosaurs. The reports get more and more graphic as we go down the list of casualties until we get to the last one, whose body was eaten and mangled to the point of being unidentifiable and too gruesome to be shown in the report, though some areas, like the head, are just barely visible, at least enough to indicate that not much of them was left behind. In their second video, titled InGen Sector 29 Encounter, CD decides to approach a more Lost World theme to it. In it, there's an emergency broadcast for the workers of Isla Sorna that warns them of escaped raptors, before going through the protocols of how to approach the situation. The information is delivered like a normal emergency broadcast. There's no over-editing, there's no overly creepy automated voice, and the information all feels necessary and relevant. The video then cuts to camera footage of the raptor, and if I'm looking at this correctly, I believe they're using clips they took of the raptors from the Jurassic World Evolution game that they overlaid with with video camera filters, which, in my opinion, is pretty clever. The video then cuts to a camera recording from the perspective of one of the InGen workers that were out at night during this incident. They attempt to run away from the raptors, which can be heard nearby, but presumably fails, with the camera cutting out before we can see anything. It's also a very simple one, but it feels very realistic, while also feeling like a proper analog horror video. However, a more elaborate video would be uploaded to this channel, called Hammond Reassurance Tape. This has to be my favorite out of their collection of videos. Not only is the overall production of it really good, it's also extremely creative with how it portrays the events that play out. The video starts with an introduction to Jurassic Park by John Hammond himself. If I'm correct, this footage is actually taken from the introductory sequence that played out during the actual Jurassic Park ride from Universal Studios. That's honestly a very clever use for that footage. The beginning sequence goes over the typical John Hammond spiel, introducing guests to the dinosaurs and ensuring their safety by explaining the security measures taken to keep the dinosaurs locked behind their enclosures. Suddenly, the tape begins to cut, and we transition to a warning that the following material in the video is only meant to be viewed by InGen officials with higher clearance. The video from this point is a guide for these higher authorities of the company to follow when death occurs at the park. Listed are the 5 key steps that the company is forced to follow to cover their asses of any liabilities and/or lawsuits. Step 1 is fairly basic, with the workers sent in to take care of the problem as soon as possible. However, things start to get weird very quickly. Step 2 states to quarantine any witnesses a part of the incident. According to the step, this is imperative to avoid any leak of information regarding the incident to the broader public. How they do this is explained in Step 3, which is having the witnesses sign NDAs and receive hush money to keep them from saying anything to the public. You also gotta love the spared no expense in this context. For the guests, this saying is a lie. For the company, it's a safety net. The steps continue with other obvious things a company would do to avoid a lawsuit, like hiding evidence and simply never speaking of the events again. The video is then intercut with Hammond, where he states,
"Perhaps I should just make note that the Costa Rica operation shut down back in '93. You might recall the wee problem we experienced, only due, I might say, to sabotage."
He references the 1993 incident and glosses over it, blaming the entire event on sabotage. However, this wasn't the only event where death took place. We just don't know about it because InGen authorities followed the 5 key steps to erasing the evidence. Luckily, one of those incidents fell through the cracks, as shown in the next segment of the video. It cuts to a call between 2 InGen employees, one named Jack Webb and the other being an unnamed dispatch caller. Webb was sent into the T-Rex enclosure to deal with a food dispenser issue, but calls in when the locking mechanism to the gate on the west side of the paddock won't work. Dispatch then attempts to help Webb through the process of rebooting the gate after it's suspected to have blown a fuse or something of the like. Webb follows their direction and goes through the electrical box, but in the process, the system glitches, causing a continuous buzzing sound. With no other choice, Dispatch sends over a technician to help Webb out, and in the meantime, Webb takes shelter within the paddock to avoid any unwanted attention caused by the buzzing. Little does Webb know, the T-Rex was already on its way. The tape then transitions to the T-Rex's perspective on things, but not necessarily through its actual point of view. Instead, the video goes over this series of events based on the T-Rex's heart rate. In the beginning, the T-Rex is shown to have a very steady and normal heart rate. Then, Webb finishes fixing the food dispenser. The T-Rex's heart rate increases a bit, but nothing serious. However, as soon as the buzzing from the gate begins, the T-Rex's heart rate increases again, indicating the noise captured its attention. When the technician finally arrives, the T-Rex's heart rate increases once more before finally making contact. The video then cuts to the POV of the Jeep after the technician arrived. They get in, start it, and drive off, but before long, their Jeep is attacked and flipped over by the T-Rex, who kills them off-screen. The video ends with one final message from John Hammond, who exclaims that safety precautions have been taken to keep an incident like the 1993 one from happening again. Of course, that was a lie, especially since according to the reports, this event with Webb and the technician took place in 1994. I love everything about this video, the way it's put together, the creativity in portraying the situation, and even how it portrays the T-Rex. Not so much a monster, but more so an opportunistic hunter. From here, the production and concepts of CD Jurassic's videos get even better. After Hammond Reassurance Tape, there were 2 other videos released. One titled Sonara CRTSAS 002, and another titled Devil from the Sea. Sonara covers an incident in which an InGen employee's remains were found inside the paddock of the park's very aggressive Carnotaurus, Sonara, and the video goes through the disturbing contents within the tapes that were found by the body. In Devil from the Deep, CD decides to set this video's story after the events of Telltale's Jurassic Park the game. The video features an Asian news channel that covers the discovery of a fishing boat that went missing in the South China Seas. The boat had washed up on shore in pieces and seems to be one of many that were attacked. Later in the video, a witness of another fishing boat that was attacked caught a glimpse of the attacker, only being able to describe that it may have had scales. It's later revealed that it was the Tylosaur responsible for these attacks, the same one featured in Jurassic Park the game. The video uses a combination of interviews, infrared imaging, and underwater found footage to tell its story, which again is very creative. I don't want to go through everything here, mainly because this video is long enough, but also because I think you should just check out this channel for yourself. While I think everyone here has the freedom to make Jurassic Park analog horror videos in whatever style they want, when it comes to a franchise like Jurassic Park, I feel like there's a way to do it to make it the most effective as analog horror, and I feel like CD Jurassic's channel does it justice. While they only have 5 videos on their channel, with the last one being made over a year ago, they did state that a while back on their community tab that the channel was not done and there would be another video at some point. Sometime later, there was a follow-up post showing this image, indicating something is in the works. Of course, this was a couple months ago, but who knows what CD Jurassic's got cooking up for us. Okay, I think you guys get the gist of Jurassic Park analog horror. There's a lot, and there's a good chance that I may have missed some for this video, and I'm sorry if I did. But there's a lot more to cover, because Jurassic Park analog horror is just one of the contributing factors to this popularity in dinosaur horror. Around the same time, another franchise was also making waves in the analog horror scene, that being Godzilla. Now, I don't plan to go as in-depth with Godzilla analog horror as I did for Jurassic Park, mainly because I feel like Godzilla has had its own trend of recent horror-related projects thanks to movies like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Minus One. Not to mention the overall resurgence and popularity that Godzilla has gotten in recent times that has reminded people of his more gritty origins. I feel like this surge of Godzilla horror media has enough for its own video, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention some of these Godzilla analog horror projects. The earliest example that I'm aware of is the Suitmation Trials, the first episode of which was uploaded on February 27th, 2022, well before the trend of Jurassic Park analog horror. The story is centered around a Godzilla fan wanting to rewatch his old Godzilla films that have been with his family for several years. However, when he gets to the second movie, Godzilla Raids Again from 1955, the tape glitches out and he's greeted with a rather disturbing image of Godzilla himself, followed by some weird cryptic messages. There are 3 main instances where this occurs, with the messages continuing to be cryptic but also hostile and even bitter, as if Godzilla himself was angry. Something was tampering with this person's tapes, and as you progress through the videos, you learn that this story is much bigger than whatever's inside those films. From what I can gather, the story is still ongoing, as their most recent video as of writing this script was uploaded just a few weeks ago. Then we have a small series of Godzilla found footage and analog horror videos by Danny Donahue, initially uploaded on December 10th, 2022, who created them through Blender. The videos actually feature the MonsterVerse Godzilla, but from the perspective of the innocent bystanders that watch and record helplessly as the monster himself tears through their city. The first 4 videos are very simple and short, not having much of a story to them, but still putting us in the shoes of people who get to see the destruction firsthand. A situation that, in itself, is pretty terrifying. Donahue's most recent video on Godzilla analog horror takes us back to 1954, telling a short story about a man who makes an encounter with Big G himself after he emerges from the ocean. On July 22nd, 2023, a channel by the name of Lost Utopia Films uploaded a video called The Griffin. The video reuses the concept of an actual unmade Godzilla movie from 1994. Basically, after Toho sold the rights to a Godzilla movie to Sony in the early 90s, who then passed the project to their subsidiary company, TriStar Pictures, there was an idea to pit Godzilla against a new foe, an alien hybrid monster called the Griffin. To summarize, the film went through development hell and eventually led to the creation of the '98 movie. But in this video, the original idea was taken and portrayed in a different way. The video is comprised of a compilation of footage taken from the bystanders who filmed the battle between the Griffin, '98 Godzilla, and even 2014's Godzilla, who makes an appearance partway through the video. The same channel would make another found footage analog horror Godzilla video called Living with Monsters on April 13th, 2024. The video is set within the universe of these famous monster movies and is in the style of a documentary, as it explores and covers the history of superfauna within this world. It makes references to other monster movie franchises aside from Godzilla, including King Kong and even Gorgo. Unknowingly's Man in the Suit series, originally uploaded on July 28th, 2023, takes us back to an alternate timeline in the original Godzilla's development, featuring a story about a mysterious actor who plays in the Godzilla suit and his strange obsession with it. This obsession turns to anger, violence, and resentment as his skin and body starts to mold within the inside of the suit, indicating a supernatural force at play. I'm sure there's plenty more examples out there, and I'm sorry if I didn't cover them here, but these are just some of the main few that I've seen. Going back to the general popularity of dinosaur horror, it's clear that people were taking advantage of the easy access of online platforms that allowed them to create artistic independent projects, and many of those people were using their talents and creative efforts to make things based on this rising demand of dinosaur horror. A lot of these are one-offs, but given the numbers they've racked in, it's a clear sign that the general concept of dinosaurs in horror continues to intrigue audiences, and there have been a wide variety of these kinds of projects. Some people continued the analog horror style on other platforms, like It's Just Shepard's couple of dinosaur analog horror videos that blew up on TikTok, the first of which was uploaded on February of this year, which features some people having to deal with an unwanted visitor in a world where scientists were able to bring dinosaurs back from extinction and one of them escapes. Another example of this was Chronodican's found footage video titled San Diego Incident, uploaded on July 7th, 2023. Chronodican is actually the same person that was behind the creation of the Jurassic Park fan game Jurassic Park Operations, which was being made through a game creation video game called Dreams, which allows you to make, design, and animate objects into a game that creators can then upload to the platform for others to play. They would post updates that recorded their progress on the game, of which Universal unfortunately caught wind of. To make a long story short, they stepped in and, from what I can see, forced Chronodican to rebrand their game so it didn't have any of the Jurassic Park name attached to it for copyright reasons. It's a shame really, considering how great the game was gearing up to look. In any case, Chronodican used his talents of animating that he learned through Dreams to jump on the dinosaur horror hype, and created his own Jurassic Park found footage video called San Diego Incident, which is a recording of a T-Rex encounter from a resident in the San Diego neighborhood that the giant dinosaur roams in the Lost World movie. The resident really doesn't do himself any favors though, as he seems to willingly put himself in the line of danger when he hears and eventually sees the T-Rex, unsurprisingly leading to his death. The concept of the video is really cool though. If there was a dinosaur roaming the neighborhoods, it would make sense that some people would want to capture that on tape. There's also Spino's dinosaur animation from April 19th, 2022, which, in a fun twist, puts them in the back room. Simply called Dinosaurs in the Backrooms, the first dinosaur, an Ankylosaurus, even clubs the shit out of one of the monsters from the Backrooms lore. Definitely more tongue-in-cheek than some of these other projects, but that doesn't make the scenario of being chased by a T-Rex in the Backrooms any less terrifying. And there's even a channel called Mudnag that combines cryptids, dinosaurs, and analog horror in their own series of videos that includes camtrail footage, 3D animations, and documentaries. But the analog horror stuff is mainly featured in the camtrail footage, the first of which was uploaded on September 19th, 2023. They have a couple of them for the raptor cryptid, the Congo raptor, and even one that captured the Mokele Mbembe on film as well. Honestly, the concept of dinosaur cryptids within the horror genre is definitely one that's worth exploring, and it's strange how there's not more people that take advantage of that idea. Speaking of animation, at the height of the Jurassic Park analog horror hype, a YouTube channel by the name of Ali Awada started making several animated Jurassic Park horror short films through Blender, with their first video being uploaded on March 24th, 2023. The videos mainly follow the park workers as they're stalked, hunted, and killed by the dinosaurs, and as generic as that sounds, some of the videos actually explore areas of Jurassic Park that don't get covered enough, if not at all. For example, in their video Paddock Disturbance, Awada offers an interesting twist, having a hostile, herbivorous, Hypsilophodon-like dinosaur be the one to attack the park worker, instead of your usual carnivorous candidates like the Velociraptors, T-Rex, or Dilophosaurus. In an even bigger twist, the video ends revealing the herbivorous dinosaurs had not only killed the park worker, but had started eating him as well, indicating that a shift in their diet of some sort had caused them to act on this urge to eat meat. On February 3rd of 2023, a YouTube channel called Wobbly Works that's dedicated to creating 3D animations uploaded a very short video called Creature of the Night, which puts us in the perspective of a person who encounters a strange creature that's revealed to be a raptor. I've seen many people reference this video in particular in favor of the argument that accurate dinosaurs can be scary. Though, like I mentioned earlier, the scariness isn't even necessarily coming from the fact that the raptor is accurate, at least not entirely. The buildup of the video, the reveal, the movements of the dinosaur, the shiny eyes within the darkness, the trick of making us believe it was a different creature at first, not to mention this particular scenario in itself, are all contributing factors that have made this dinosaur scary. But in any case, it's extremely effective, and does prove one point, that dinosaurs in horror does work. The same channel would follow up with another, less popular video on March 25th, 2023, called Tenontosaurus in the Woods, which features the titular dinosaur being stalked and hunted by a quiet but deadly predator. It's executed really well. It's a very quiet video, no loud sounds or jump scares, which in the context of the video makes sense. A hunter wouldn't want to be loud when stalking its prey, so realistically, in this situation, you wouldn't be able to hear your killer as they watch you closely enough until they strike. In other cases, there's more artistic approaches to this genre of paleomedia, like David Romero's Dinosaur Ghosts from October 25th, 2023. The video itself is not necessarily scary in the same sense as the other videos we've talked about, but there's still a very haunting and eerie feel to it. The video showcases the modern world, but among it are the spirits of the ancient past. Dinosaurs roaming the streets and stores and subway systems, but as apparitions. Though, as the ending shows, humans aren't completely free of their teeth and maws. The video's art style gives off an array of visuals, some being beautiful and full of awe, like the pterosaurs flying through the city and the sauropods roaming through the night, while others are more unsettling and creepy, like the pliosaur swimming alongside the buildings or the focused stare of the theropod at the end of the video. And even more recently, on August 29th of this year, a channel called Sagan Hawks uploaded a video called No One Can Find This Creepy Dinosaur Game, which documents his search for a creepy childhood dinosaur game that they remembered playing when they were younger, called Escape Triassic Hall. Eventually, he's able to find the game and even shows it to us. The game is about you, the player, exploring a museum, but throughout, the dinosaur animatronics displayed around the museum start coming to life, and you have to traverse through the building to find a way to escape. However, it's revealed at the end of the video that this was just an unfiction film by the channel, meaning the film was a work of fiction that was meant to be passed off as real. The video is more so meant as a commentary of our fascination and fear of media becoming lost, and its theme is cleverly incorporated within the game itself that's featured in the video. It's an interesting project that cleverly combines a fictional story, dinosaur horror, and lost media all into one package. There's no doubt other examples out there, but these are just some of the highlights of some of the more popular things I've seen within this community. Of course, one of, if not the most popular thing to rise from this dinosaur horror hype would be posted on September 21st, 2023. On this date, a Twitter page by the name of Arkasuchus would begin to post a series of photos on the site, telling a story from his own perspective, of a person who keeps being visited by strange and, as he'll soon learn, deadly animals. And he posts his experience of his encounters with these creatures as it progresses. This, of course, would be the Weird Birds post that would go on to spawn a whole new trend of dinosaur horror, which we'll get into in a bit. And when I say this thing got popular, I mean it was viewed over 40 million times. This is something that so many of you have asked me to cover, so I want to take some time to go through the story itself. Also, before we get into this, the story is told through a first-person perspective, but I don't think the character of this story is supposed to be Archosuchus himself. But by the time I realized this, I had already written this section out, and I constantly refer to the character as Archosuchus. I'm too tired to make any changes to this already long script, so I'm going to be referring to the character as Archosuchus for this whole segment. But just know that technically, the two are meant to be disconnected. Anyways, the first picture shows a strange bird-like animal looking through the glass door of a man's house, and the caption that accompanies it reads, "Our dog has been barking and scratching up the back door every night. He has been doing this for days, so I sat with him last night to find the issue. I snapped a flash pic of the back door when he barked and captured this. Be very careful outside because this does not look normal." The post was followed up with another that gives a bit more information. This is all taking place in the suburbs of Chicagoland, and the animal took off after its picture was taken. The following day, on September 22nd, another post was made. It reads, "Update on this animal. I am having a garage sale and one of my neighbors came over with his kids. I talked to them about the weird animal, and they have actually seen it too. One of the kids made this drawing depicting the animal. Cut the artist some slack, he's only 6. The picture attached shows a crude drawing of not one, but 2 animals, one larger than the other. Labeled on top are the words Big Bird. Intrigued, the poster attempts to record the animal later that night, but is only able to get a recording of the sounds it makes. Along with that, he did manage to actually get a picture of the creature itself. But due to how dark it was, the only thing that could be picked up were its eyes. Sometime later that night, Archosuchus returns with another update. Update on the animal. I did something really stupid and left the back door completely unlocked for hours. I actually heard something hit the floor downstairs. When I looked, the chicken I bought from the store was missing, but I found the packaging outside through the open door. Luckily, he and his dog were in the office when this occurred. But the encounter doesn't end quite yet. Shortly after, the handle to the door begins to jiggle, indicating the creatures are trying to get back into the house. Luckily, Archosuchus locked his doors this time, and he even managed to get another picture of the creature, though it's very zoomed in from his window, so it's not the best quality. However, the creatures seem to be exploring around the house, finding ways to get in, because from a different window, Archosuchus was able to get another, much clearer image of the animal. Got one, but it was weirdly easy. The thing just stood completely still with its neck craned up, unblinking. I think as I was studying it, it was doing the same, like it was fascinated with my light or something. It is a little over 5 feet tall if I had to guess. After making this post, he also states that he heard something scream and yelp from his front yard, but as the night progresses, the noise eventually stops. The next day, September 23rd, Archosuchus does some research on the animal that he encountered the previous night. But he couldn't find anything on it, causing him to believe that whatever it was completely foreign to the area. What he does know about the animal is that it's feathered, it's smart, and it's nocturnal, as all of the encounters had taken place at night so far. Later that day, he makes another update post. Update on the animal. So I was looking for tracks of the creature and couldn't seem to find anything. I guess it's light on its feet, but I did find a clump of animal matter. This seems to be some kind of pellet, like owl pellets I dissected as a kid, but way bigger. Shortly after finding this weird hairball looking thing, Archosuchus makes another post. He had dissected the clump, and within it were the bones of small animals. This discovery prompts the poster to investigate more around the property, leading him to find tracks, though he wonders if they might belong to a deer. However, sometime after this post, Archosuchus makes another follow-up, this time revealing a new creature. Okay, so I spotted a different animal, but it looks just as bizarre as the first. It looks like some kind of little mutant bird. There was more than one of these, and this one here was catching flying bugs. They move quickly and are very skittish. He takes another picture, this time managing to get 2 of the weird smaller birds. The caption states, "This one has been fighting other birds over something. Should I go outside and see what it is?" I figure it should be safe right now since the patio lights are up and running. But as he continues to watch the animals fight over the object, Arcosukis grows concerned when he sees the object starting to bleed all over the patio. Arcosukis is able to make his way outside and see what the object is, but the discovery makes him sick to his stomach. The object the small birds were fighting over was the bloody foot and shoe of a child. He goes to call the cops, but when he comes back outside, the shoe is gone, likely taken back by the small birds. So he goes over to warn his neighbors of what they're dealing with. However, Arcosukis returns with another post that reads, "My neighbors did not answer the door. I don't know why, but their lights are all on. I hope they're okay. I did find this crumpled on the sidewalk though. It looks like another drawing made by their little boy. I seriously hope he isn't going up and feeding those animals." The image shows the drawing of the boy feeding hot dogs to the wildlife, indicating his untimely fate. But the night doesn't end there. Something is on the roof. I think whatever was on the roof left because the scratching sounds up there stopped. Something moved in the backyard again though. It was a long dark mass. I think it was the large animal from before. I'm kind of horrified right now. This was followed with a video that he took showing that something had left a trail of feathers by his back door. He uploads another clip with no video, but audio of the sounds the animals make. You can clearly hear these animals vocalizing outside my kitchen window. They are so loud. It's a variety of noises now. Also, iService vehicles are on the move hauling ass everywhere right now. This is a living nightmare. Things only get weirder when Arcosukis starts hearing voices outside too, though they don't sound right. In his final post for the night, Arcosukis says, "Whatever was on my roof never fucking left. I'll try to record the voice when I hear it again. This thing on the roof is definitely different from anything else though. It's spindly. It can go fuck itself." And followed it with a picture of the animal itself, though the only part of it you can see in the dark are its eyes. The next day, on September 24th, Arcosukis makes more posts on the situation, first pointing out that some bat had showed up on the screen door, though it might be unrelated to the strange animal encounters he's made recently. He also updates people that his dog is at his grandma's house, so he's all alone in the house, and things get really creepy. The animals are revealed to have the ability to mimic sounds, and it's clear that they try to use this ability to mimic sounds familiar to their victims to lure them out of the safety of their shelter. In this case, they're attempting to mimic voices to lure Arcosukis out of his home. And based on what I can pick up, it sounds like the animals are saying something like "help" and "I am hungry," though I could be wrong. In any case, the attempts to try and mimic human voices to trick other people out of their homes is a clever method of hunting to incorporate in a dinosaur horror story. Going back to it, things only get more tense. In another update, it's revealed that Arcosukis is dealing with more than one of these creatures. Animal update. My heart sank to the fucking floor. There are 100% at least 2 of the larger animals. I just walked away from the kitchen where the first one was talking and turned the corner into my family room and see the second one outside the window motionless. Take a look. Also showing an image of the creature itself. The encounter freaks him out, prompting him to take shelter within his basement for the rest of the night. He posts more updates revealing that he forgot his charger and that his phone is at low charge. However, when he tried to go up to risk retrieving his charger, he quickly changed his mind when he heard the doorknobs from different parts of the house were being jiggled. He then posts, "My phone is at 3% right now. I'm in the crawl space right now hiding behind bins of Christmas decorations. I heard glass shattering upstairs and thuds, which is why I'm tucked away. If I don't make it, you stay safe. This could be it, and I'm so fucking scared." I can only imagine those who were following the story at the time were at the edge of their seats, wondering the fate of Arcosukis. But sometime later, he writes another post confirming he escaped. "I was able to open the window well down here and escape through it. I waited everything out in my car. Not much activity in my house, I think. I can probably go back soon. Cautiously. It's daytime now, so it should be good. I used the car charger to juice up the phone. The police aren't responding to me." He does take this time to check out one of his neighbor's house where he posts another update. Animal update. So my neighbor's screened-in porch is trashed, and there is just the weirdest looking animal thing in there. It saw me, but it isn't doing anything really. Seems shy. Look at this fucking thing though. What the hell is happening here? Shortly after, Arcosukis makes an interesting and unsettling discovery. Animal update. Something fucking killed the giant bird thing. I'm both relieved and horrified about this. Attached is a photo of the decapitated bird. Could it have been killed by one of its own? Maybe this is an example of cannibalism within its species. Or could this have been the doing of something bigger and meaner? Maybe an animal like a cougar or maybe a wolf? Or maybe an even bigger bird? In any case, the discovery itself is still concerning. But things get more concerning when the screaming returns, because this time a wind-like noise can be heard amongst it. Arcosukis makes an update about this. "Here are the terrifying new sounds I'm hearing outside. Whatever the hell this thing is, it's loud and sounds massive. Also, all of its noises, they have a kind of bass to them. I can feel these noises reverberating through my body. It makes my hair stand up." He records another audio clip of the sound. In a not-so-smart move, Arcosukis used up all of his car energy to charge his phone. But he does manage to get back inside his house, where he boards up the broken window and discovers that something was pawing at the laundry room door from the outside. Then, in a weird twist, Arcosukis is visited by another animal, this one being a deer. There is a fucking deer trying at the door. What the fuck? Also looks to be missing an antler. Poor guy, but what the fuck? This was followed by another update. Animal update. A normal animal hears the buck deer and it's trying to get into my house. I am genuinely so confused. Is it asking to get targeted? It wouldn't be long before the deer noticed him and ran away, but shortly after, Arcosukis would hear another disturbing sound. I just heard a shit ton of chaos in the bushes and shit right outside the kitchen window. And there's a lot of noise. Something crashed and was just wailing. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that one of the big bird things is sitting out there as well. Here, listen to this. This was followed with more talking, which to Arcosukis sounded normal. However, it turns out it's the animals again. They seem to be getting better with mimicking voices, as they start to sound eerily close to real human voices. Never fucking mind, it's definitely not normal. I think the same bird-like fucks are trying to get me to come out of my house again. Here's the talking. They seem to be getting a lot better at it. Attached are 2 videos that showcase just how clear yet uncanny the voices sound.
Don't worry. It's okay. Open. Please help. Somebody. God, oh. Oh, God. Oh, God. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, God, please. Come here. It's okay.
If things weren't already creepy enough, it gets so much worse with the next post. I'm fucking crying now. I fear the worst has happened to my neighbors. Listen to this shit. He is fucking gone. That was his foot.
Daddy. 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 It's okay. Daddy.
The words the animals mimic indicate they managed to get the boy, and likely his parents as well. In the final post for this day, Arkasukas shares a video, showing a trail of shoes was left behind by his back door. Eventually, the next day follows, and on September 25th, another post updates that the giant bird thing had left, though the vibrations came back. Arkasukas eventually barricades himself in the basement again, this time being better prepared, and it seems he even managed to get some rest as well. But this doesn't last too long, as later on, he wakes up to hear footsteps around the house. He then posts a video of him booking it across his yard and hiding out in some undisclosed location. The following day, on September 26th, he eventually writes out another post. Holy shit, a lot just happened. There were 3 big bird dinosaur animals in my house, my heart. Okay, I'm alive. I'm a little bruised, but I'm alive. There were 3 fucking velociraptor looking fucks in my house sniffing me out. I had to escape through the window well again, and those fuckers must have heard me leave. I was running through the forest preserve nearby and had to camp it out with no service. I recorded some things, but not a lot. I was on the way back home for water, and then it showed up. The thing was extraordinarily huge, had to have weighed tons. There wasn't any explanation for why this abomination stood before me in my block, and I didn't need one. I just needed to run, and I needed to hide. I made those videos because I thought that it was going to be over. May as well document my last moments, right? My home is barricaded a lot now. Hang on, the cricket stopped. He then posts a picture of the creature itself and continues to state, "It moved to the side of my house and beyond. It moved so quietly and gracefully. For something that big, you'd think it'd be noisy. Oh hell, as I'm writing this out, there is something happening out there." Arkasukas then hears something that may or may not be human. With these things, it's hard to tell. It sounds like a woman crying. It feels wrong, but I'm not going to check on it. The woman sounds like she's screaming now. I'm really afraid it's genuine. Several days go by before he eventually writes another post on October 1st. She was a real woman, and I did nothing to help her. He also continues with more updates, stating that not much had happened in the last 3 days aside from the strange noises. Though things do start getting interesting again. Not only is he paid yet another visit by the big birds again, he's also finally able to document the source of the loud rumblings he's been hearing as well. This thing is 100% the source of the thunder-like booms and rumblings I've been hearing for a while. It doesn't seem to even notice I'm here. It's just ambling. I don't see or hear any of those fucked up bird-like predators, and the human screaming has stopped for a while. Attached is a photo of what seems to be some kind of large sauropod dinosaur right outside of his house. He also notices something else in the image, of which he's able to take a closer picture of on the following day on October 2nd, though it's hard to make out what it is exactly. Arkasukas also shares a bit of information they've been holding for a while, but didn't remember to mention until now. I should have mentioned I took a picture of this on a dog walk much earlier, like a week before the first bird thing disturbed my dog at the window. It might have been a part of a police sketch, I think, indicating that these animals could have been here for a while. In any case, Arcosukis wants to leave from here, though according to another post on the same day, his friend that was supposed to pick him up to take him out of state never showed up. As if that wasn't strange enough, he also begins to notice lights in the sky. There are now some extremely weird noises and lights in my backyard and also in the sky. I'm gonna make a run for the basement, but here are some pictures I took of them. These are in separate locations of my yard. What the fuck are these? Some kind of obscure lighting? This light phenomenon only gets weirder when one starts to emit from within the basement. I can't go in the basement. There is one of those lighting things happening at the bottom. My body is in a lot of pain for some reason and I feel weak. I tried to take a picture of the one at the bottom of the stairs, but it really fucks with the camera and adds fucking strings. Not only is the light bright, but it also emits a bad smell that makes him sick. But before long, it eventually disappears. Whatever it was, it also seemed to have messed up his phone as well, as it now sounds weird whenever he tries to record on it. But help has finally arrived, as Arcosukis posts audio of the sirens in the distance, though this only results in another strange and creepy encounter. Time goes by, and eventually the next day, October 3rd, rolls around. After this post, Arcosukis shares this clip of someone knocking on his door.
Got his number or something? I don't know. The jury's gone. Go.
It sure sounds like a person, but Arcosukis doesn't open the door, explaining, "There is nobody at my door, and I see nothing. I don't hear anything either, just crickets. What the fuck? Where did those people go? They said they were police, by the way, and gave badge numbers. I am just too afraid to go look or reach out to them. I'm quietly crying right now." He then makes another post with an image that says, "There is a man standing at the door right now. He isn't doing anything but waiting quietly. I took this pic after more knocking. I don't know if I should go over to investigate. Still no lights." The man eventually disappears, but something else does manage to get inside the house. Luckily for Arcosukis, it's not that dangerous. I ignored the man and he eventually disappeared, but I found something a lot less frightening in my dog's crate. Somehow, a smaller bird thing got into the house and is currently rolling around in my dog's bed. It doesn't show any fear towards me or aggression. Here's an image again. I don't mind this one very much, but I'm not about to go near it. Still looks fucked up kinda. The image itself shows the little raptor checking out the dog bed, which is a rather cute contrast compared to the more gritty, creepy posts that we've been reading up to this point. Despite Arcosukis not wanting to go near the animal, he does manage to lock it up in the dog crate. He even feeds it, as it doesn't seem to show any real aggression towards him. Eventually, he even lets it out of the cage, where it then crashes on the couch. I let it out and it's currently sleeping on the couch. I'm going to take it to the basement and try to sleep myself. It will be in the crate, obviously. I'm going to call him Mike. A few days go by. We don't get another post from Arcosukis until October 7th. Mikey woke me up. We heard gunshots and screaming outside. There's a lot of it. There are a lot of people outside. He then posts another picture of Mikey with text that reads, "We're kind of afraid right now. He's pacing underneath the pool table and wheezing. I'm wondering where the fuck guns have been in all of this." Mikey then flies up to the ceiling crawl space, which is followed by a bunch of sounds. When Arcosukis pokes his head to see what it is, he manages to capture this image, showing that many of those smaller raptors had made their way into this space in the house. While it definitely looks creepy, they don't seem to be interested in him. Shortly after, the power starts going in and out of the house. Eventually, the power cuts out completely. Arcosukis then posts 2 more video clips, but only the audio can be heard.
Look at me. Look at me. Who loves you?
Mom.
Okay?
Mom.
You're gonna be okay.
I'm hurting.
Your brother's gonna be okay.
It'll be okay. It's okay.
They may sound human, but according to Archisuchus himself, this is coming straight from his ceiling. The raptor had managed to learn how to imitate human voices almost perfectly, this time being a woman and a child. Archisuchus tries to get a flash picture of it in the crawl space, but soon, the animal itself is making its way through the ceiling. Currently hiding in the crawl space and holding my breath with my phone at 4%. Here's the image I took before hiding. I'm going to fucking die. This is it. I think it's over. I heard it fall onto my workout equipment. It's impersonating a woman and child again and clawing the door. Several more days go by and we get another post by Archisuchus on October 15th. He shows off a screenshot of an automated emergency message text that a friend of his received from FEMA, who issued an evacuation of the area as several people have been dealing with these strange wild animals. Along with this message was an image attached, showing one of the animals that's been attacking residents, though it looks different than what Archisuchus had been dealing with. According to him, this image was taken in Michigan. He shows off more messages between he and his friend, who points out that the only people he's seen outside are the ones that are in uniform, with an emblem that he doesn't recognize. However, there are shelters available for civilians, though Archisuchus is too out of the way for his friend to get him. For now, he's still on his own. A lot of time goes by before his next post, almost 2 months to be exact. On December 7th, he makes another update. Update, I'm probably out of Illinois by now. It turns out there are safe ways to travel, like down here. I had to scavenge the probable chargers from stores. A lot of them are pretty much ransacked at this point. I'm running low on food though, and will have to go up eventually. I was able to make it to my friend. We had an encounter on the streets whilst driving away, and he's gone. So is the car. I didn't take any photos or video of it, but it's left me shaken for quite some time now. I miss him. He continues to traverse through the tunnels, but eventually he makes his way back to the surface after hearing strange noises and making an encounter with another strange animal. I heard that distant chuckle sound again from the tunnel and turned on my light. This is what I saw standing deeper inside. No movement. And it looked like it had no eyes. This fucking thing is what's been down there this whole time. It was holding something fleshy. I'm far away now. Along with showing a blurry image of the creature itself. The following day, on December 8th, he points out that the lights he had seen before were back. The tunnel is many yards away from me now, but the weird glowing spots are back, and they're literally everywhere. They're freaking out and constantly changing colors now. They turn up green on my camera though. I don't know what these are, but I think they could be wormholes. Several more days go by. On December 23rd, Archisuchus updates everyone, talking about an interesting incident he had with one of the possible wormholes. Those wormholes completely fried my phone's camera, and I lost all service. One of them opened right next to me. I felt drawn to it, like it was sucking me in. I swear I could see an image of trees inside, but I didn't go. Maybe I should've. Something's been trailing me. He continues on his way, and eventually is able to find shelter within a cemetery. At this point in the story, things have gotten pretty desolate around this part of the world. Shops have been ransacked, people are scarce, but danger always lingers. As a result, Archisuchus has been needing to fend for himself and eat whatever food he can find. Eventually, his camera is able to work again, and when it does, he posts this picture. I heard loud crunching and stuff. It's in this direction, but I can't see anything. It's too damn foggy out, and there's not much movement happening. Weirdly, as soon as I turned this way, the noise stopped. I'm headed back inside now. This is creepy. Upon closer inspection of the image, Archisuchus notices something about it. There was something there, and the crunching sounds I heard, it was the snapping of bones. It had to be. Look, it's got something. Probably something human. I threw my food far away so the smell distracts it. Looking at it closer, it's those bird-like fuckers again. They're back. And just like that, he's being hunted by them once again. Luckily, he was able to get away. I was able to evade them thanks to more strange lights. These showed up red instead of green though. I don't know why. The weird birds attacked the lights, and it kept them busy long enough for me to leave. Here's an image. Later that night, he's forced to camp out into the woods. Suddenly, he's greeted by an old friend, Mikey. And what's even better is that he shows up with food that he shares with Archisuchus. Under the circumstances, he's happy to see Mikey again, though things don't stay happy for very long, as voices can be heard in the distance. As you can already tell, they don't belong to humans. As the night progresses, the next day rolls around. On December 24th, he posts, "My audio's back up and running thankfully. Listen to these bastards. They're far away, but they're extremely loud. Mikey and I are paralyzed by it." It isn't long before they're approached by the raptors mimicking the voices. Something's approaching. They found us. I ran as fast as possible far away. I'm in a barren strip mall hiding in an alley. Before I got here, I heard Mikey screaming and frantically flapping into the trees. He seemed to catch the attention of those monsters more than I did, as they stayed there. Arcosukis is able to take another image of the raptor, which is possibly the clearest one we've seen yet. I took a flash pic back there and screamed in hopes to scare it. I just looked at the result. It's shockingly clear. Here it is, my demon. Regardless of the dangers, he attempts to go back to look for Mikey. A few days pass. On December 30th, he updates that he wasn't able to find Mikey, though he's found plenty of the strange lights that keep emerging all around. That night, he continues to hear strange noises, but what's even stranger is that he finally encounters one of the creatures responsible for those noises, and also manages to get a couple of pictures. I found the source of the deep chattering sounds. It's not as big as it sounds. If I had to guess, it's 7 feet tall. It's not paying any attention to me. It's eating something else on the ground. Looks like it's eating a pumpkin or something. I can try and get a photo. Here it is. I can't even begin to describe it. It doesn't look like anything I have ever seen in my life. It's standing in front of me right now like a deer in headlights. I'm gonna slowly back off now. This thing is fucked up. I'm out of the woods entirely. Holy shit. That fucker's face split open slowly. It ran me out of the woods and I could hear more of that bizarre talking or whatever. What the hell even was that freak? I took a picture while it was unfurling its face at me and hissing. Take a look at this fucker. But he's eventually chased off until he finds a road. As he continues traveling, his phone starts acting up again and he begins to feel sick. I can barely feel my senses. I feel like I'm gonna die. But something's right in front of me. My camera couldn't really capture it, but I tried. I'm fading in and out. This is so much feeling. Arcosukis doesn't come to until a couple of days later, on January 1st, 2024. I woke up cold this morning with a ringing in my head. Suddenly, there's snow everywhere and I can't feel my fingers. Walking around, the roads are still barren, and everything is so much quieter. Someone got brutalized in the road, but I'm sure as hell not going to take a look. He then notices there were several smaller dead critters scattered around. It's extremely cold all of a sudden. I can see my own breath. A bunch of the animals died from this snap. Looking around, there's a lot of prehistoric dead things. Here's some that I have photographed. He finds small raptors, pterosaurs, and amphibians, but the one he's concerned most about is his friend Mikey. He attempts to search for him, only running into more dead critters. Eventually, he does find Mikey, but unfortunately for the small raptor, he had succumbed to the cold weather. The world may have ended last month, but today, whatever was left of mine is gone. I've been sitting here for the past hour or so with him. I can't believe he's just fucking laying there. It's done. I'm done. He had a fish with him. I'll take it, I guess. Thanks for everything you've done for me. I'll see you soon, friend. I'm getting cold too. He goes on his way, but it's not long before Arcosukis encounters another raptor. Well, I heard a baby crying in the grass. Sure enough, it's no baby. They're back, and this will be the final time we meet. I've decided, this dance we've been doing together, it ends today. It's not shown, but based on the next post made on January 2nd, Arcosukis actually fought the raptor that had been stalking him. I'm bleeding heavily now, but I fought with my all, and battered that motherfucker. I used a rock to hit its head and my flashlight to disorient it. I didn't kill it, but I sure tried. Here's a picture from that event. I'm in a lot of pain right now, probably broke something. The fight continues into the night, and soon he was greeted by another old friend. We fought into the night. A lot of it was just standoffs and chases. Eventually, some barking scared it off. I actually saw a pack of stray dogs along with my own dog. They saved me. My dog Archie, he actually came over and said hello to me. But ultimately, he left to travel onward with his new group. I missed him so much, but I'm too weak to go anywhere much now. May they rip my neighbor's killer limb from limb. Night eventually turns into day, but Arcosukis is very injured from these attacks. Regardless, he continues updating. Watching the sunrise. I'm more cold than ever with these torn clothes. My breath backlit by the sunrise is beautiful. Man, I miss my life. Having it cut short at just 32 sucks. I wish I could keep going. My poor family, friends, and neighbors. And Mikey. Poor boy. I'm sorry. But before anything happens, Arcosukis is paid one last visit. This time from Mikey's flock. Mikey isn't here, but his contemporaries are. I guess some of them were able to stave off the cold better than he could. I don't know how much longer we'll all last though. I can't feel my hands or face. They brought me food to share, it looks like. Sorry guys, I can't. The story finally ends with one more post from Arcosukis. I'm crying. They're all sitting down next to me. I wish I can tell them how much I appreciate their company, and how much I miss our friend. It's fine though. I think I'm gonna be seeing him soon, along with the others. My phone is at 3%, and so am I. Goodbye, wild world. And that was Weird Birds, at least part 1. In my opinion, I thought it was very creative, and while I would have been happy with just a simple dinosaur sighting home invasion story, I was not at all unhappy with the more science fiction twist we ended up getting towards the end there. Overall, it was definitely an effective story, both as a dinosaur one and a horror one. It did a good job in making a lot of the images subtle, yet creepy at the same time, and moments intense and genuinely scary. My favorite aspect has to be the raptors being able to mimic human voices. That, in a real encounter, would genuinely be scary to see. And there's a whole other part to it that's set in the same world, but from the perspective of other characters, has several more creatures, and explores more of the Weird Birds lore. But for the sake of brevity, I'm gonna put a pin in it for now. I may cover it in the future should the trend of dinosaur horror continues, but there's a lot to unpack when it comes to what Weird Birds eventually led to. First off, its popularity would launch a whole different style of dinosaur horror. One that's much simpler, yet just as effective as a lot of the other projects we've talked about in this video. And that's the concept of creepy images of dinosaur sightings that are passed off as real. And since Weird Birds took off on Twitter, that's where you'll find most of these images. Just days after Arcosukis' Twitter thread, people were uploading their own images of dinosaur sightings in all sorts of creative ways, which would go on to be called the Weird Birds trend. Some of them are completely drawn, others are drawn into real environments, and others are cleverly edited photos. One Twitter user even cleverly inserted raptors into a small series of camtrail images, which would realistically be the perfect place to try and spot one in real life. As expected, raptors were a huge candidate for this, given their use in the original Weird Birds Twitter thread, but also because the thread itself proves they are the perfect choice for a horror-centric project like this. Some people bring out the grittiness and horror of these dinosaurs, while others have a more self-aware and funny approach to them. Some include more than just raptors. There's some that have T-Rexes, Spinosaurs, sauropods, one included an Oviraptor dinosaur, and another had a Jurassic Park 3 Ceratosaurus. Not all of them were dinosaurs. Some people used this opportunity to give other prehistoric fauna some spotlight. Pterosaurs were a popular choice, especially since in some cases, depending on the pterosaur, they had the potential to look genuinely scary. Another showed a small herd of what I think are supposed to be Placerius, or some other Permian or Triassic reptile. And there's one that even features Godzilla. As you can see from some of these images, some areas of this trend isn't so much about the horror aspect of it, and is more so just people encountering prehistoric wildlife. Though not all of the scenarios are peaceful. So this has been a very long video, and we've covered a lot in it, and looking back I realized that there's many differences to the things that we've covered. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to one point. To recap, I started this video pointing out that this rise and popularity of modern visual dinosaur horror is being expressed mainly through small-scaled productions by small creators. I then pointed out that many of these works were inspired mainly by 90s depictions of dinosaur horror media. But this begged the question, why was this genre of dinosaur media becoming popular now? While there's definitely more factors at play, my main argument is that it boiled down to the fact that mainstream media wasn't giving audiences what they wanted from dinosaurs and horror. So, independent creators took the ever-present and easily accessible tools, resources, and platforms offered by the internet, and used it to create their own works of dinosaur horror in the form of indie video games, analog horror videos, and online ARGs, to varying quality. While not trying to be mean, some of them are just not very well made, or don't look all that remarkable, or don't accomplish their horror well. While others seem to understand how to portray dinosaurs effectively within the genre, and have used that to create things that are haunting, beautiful, and even genuinely scary. But more than anything, this whole trend has shown just how creative people have gotten with it. And because of that, we have this really cool corner of the internet now that's dedicated to this weird but fun world of horror-oriented paleomedia. But what does that mean for the medium? What happens now? Well, while things have definitely slowed down a bit, it's not like it's necessarily stopped. Dinosaur horror games continue to be worked on and announced, and there's still plenty of people making Jurassic Park analog horror videos. But more than anything, people have still shown an interest in dinosaur horror in one way or another. And it even seems like mainstream platforms are finally hearing people out and giving them what they want, because there's been several announcements and updates within this last year alone of dinosaur horror projects. Last December, a trailer for a new official thriller-based Jurassic Park game called Jurassic Park Survival was released. Meant to take place right after the 1993 incident, you play as a new character, Dr. Maya Joshi, who has to make her way around the dangers of Isla Nublar after being left behind on the island. While I don't think it has a release date quite yet, I think it's slated to come out sometime in 2025. There was also the release of Jurassic World Chaos Theory, a sequel show to Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which follows the campers years later in a new adventure that, from what I've seen, is meant to be more intense and darker than its 2020 predecessor. Originally released in May of this year, the show is already being followed up with a Season 2 this October. But the Jurassic franchise isn't the only one having all the fun. Since 2022, it was announced that the science fiction horror survival war book Primitive War was getting an official movie adaptation. In case you don't know, Primitive War takes place in the late 60s, during the Vietnam War. A search and rescue squad are sent into the jungle to find a previous and now missing team, only to encounter bloodthirsty dinosaurs. Based on what the movie posters say, the film is looking to have a 2025 release date. And even Dino Crisis is making a return, as just recently in PlayStation's 2024 State of Play, a livestream event where they announced new and upcoming video games for their consoles, they announced that Dino Crisis would be returning for PlayStation Plus later this year. Let's hope these projects don't fall through, and if they don't, the future seems pretty bright for dinosaur horror media. And who knows, maybe it will continue to grow depending on how successful it is for audiences. Or maybe it's destined to only last a short period. I suppose only time will tell. But in any case, it's been fun covering these smaller scaled projects. And should this trend continue, I'd be more than happy to make a follow-up sometime in the future, documenting more of the creative, fun, and even dumb things people make. But for now, I'll leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and please, have a happy Halloween.